Good evening, everyone. This is City Council. Roger.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Welcome to this meeting of Dundee City Council, which is being held remotely in terms of Section 43 of the Local Governance in Scotland Act 2003. All members in attendance are able to fully participate in the meeting, which is being recorded. Should any member need to leave the meeting for any reason, can they please use the chat to advise of this? If a member loses their connection, they should make every effort to rejoin the meeting, but if this is not possible, the Committee Services Officer will note their absence for the remainder of the meeting. If you have to leave the meeting due to a declaration of interest, you must remain out of the meeting until invited back in. Would all members please mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noise and turn off any smart speakers. Please start the meeting with your camera on. Your face will appear on the screen when you are speaking. If your connection is poor, you may wish to turn off your camera and see if this improves matters. If this doesn't help, you may wish to quickly leave the meeting and rejoin. If you wish to raise a point of order, ask a question, speak on any item or move a motion or amendment, please use the chat when the relevant item is called. The convener will then invite you to speak. Would members of the press and public please not post messages in the chat? Where items are for noting, or where there has been no disagreement expressed, the convener will call for any member who has a contrary view to indicate this through the chat, otherwise the item will be agreed. Please would members not use the chat for any other purposes, as those joining the meeting by telephone cannot see the chat and therefore will not be able to follow the debate. Although we are operating in a different way, this is still a formal meeting of the Council, and the required standards of behaviour and discussion are the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Standing orders will apply to the proceedings, and the terms of the Councillors' Code of Conduct will also apply in the normal way. Does any member have any queries regarding this procedure? There are no queries, Lord Provost, so I will now ask the Committee Services Officer to take a roll call for the minute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would now ask if members could confirm they are present when I call their name. Lord Provost.
Present.
Councillor Alexander.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Anderson.
Present.
Deputy Lord Provost Cardell.
Present.
Bailey Dawson.
Apologies from Bailey Dawson.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nackler.
Present.
Councillor Flynn.
Good evening, present.
Councillor Hunter.
Good evening, present.
Councillor Lynn.
Present.
Bailey Roberts.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Rome.
Good evening, present.
Bailey Soares.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Short.
Evening, I'm here.
Councillor Smith.
I'm here.
Councillor Toland.
Hi, I am here.
Bailey Keenan.
Present.
Councillor Cruikshank.
Present.
Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Finnegan is absent at this moment in time. Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Councillor McIrvin.
Present.
Councillor Malone.
I'm here.
Councillor Scullen.
Present.
Councillor Shears.
Present.
Bailey Wright.
She's absent.
Bailey McPherson.
Good evening, present.
Councillor Coleman.
Good evening.
Councillor Crichton.
Present.
Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Bailey Scott. Bailey Scott. Bailey Scott is absent at this moment in time, and I believe that Councillor Finnegan has now joined the meeting. Is Councillor Finnegan now present?
She's saying she's having difficulty in getting into the meeting, but she can hear it.
Okay, thank you very much. That
Just to
concludes
confirm,
roll
Mr.
call.
Waddle.
Scott, I noticed Billy Scott's on the meeting as well.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you very much, Bailey Scott. And Mark is
Thank you.
present. That concludes the roll call.
Thank you. Roger, can you proceed with City Council, please?
Thank you. Lord Provost, members of the Council, there is one item of business this evening, item B, the minutes for information and record purposes.
I ask if anyone has any questions. I don't see any. Are these minutes agreed? Thank you. That concludes City Council this evening. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Provost. The next committee is the Community Safety and Public Protection Committee.
Good evening and welcome to the meeting. We're going to just start with item 1. Willie, do you want to take us through?
It's myself who'll be doing it, Billy Roberts.
Oh,
so
sorry,
apologies.
Veronica, I never saw you there.
No problem. Item 1, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations?
I'm not seeing any hands up, so I think we'll just move on to number 2.
Item 2, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Quarterly Performance Report, 1st of October to 31st of December 2022. This is for noting.
And I could see Jason on the call, and I could see Paul on the call as well. So who's taking us through this one?
Good evening. It's Jason Sharp speaking here. If it's okay, I'll give an overview and then open up to Paul to go into a bit more detail, and then we'll answer some questions if that's okay. I trust everyone's had an opportunity to review the scrutiny report. Group Commander Robertson spent some time on reviewing the approach within this slightly to reduce some of the duplication and focus on giving a bit more succinct description of what the data is telling us. Hopefully this has been helpful to you, and of course if you've got any observations, please let us know. Just pulling out a few key updates from my perspective, looking at the priority 1 for accidental intentional dwelling fires. What won't be recorded within the report because it falls out of our stats is a deliberate fire within Provost Drive, Dundee, where unfortunately a gentleman passed away as a fire fatality. So our fire investigation, we're working jointly with Police Scotland on that, and we did a post-domestic incident review in the area, and Paul will be leading on that case conference on my behalf. To give you some assurance in what we are doing in the wider context, I think, just for information, we had a meeting last week with the Chief Officers Group, chaired by Mr. Colgan, and I felt really reassured with the combined work that the various groups and agencies within that forum, supported by ourselves and Police Scotland, to refer vulnerable people to our relative community safety teams to ensure we're targeting our resource efficiently. And also the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are adding to our community action team resource to provide some additional capacity to support partners make sustainable improvement in this area. Priority 2 for us, improving fire safety resilience in the business community. You will be aware of the fire we had this calendar year within Perth, where unfortunately we had 3 fatalities. It's just to give you some assurance. I know it doesn't fit into the reporting period, but we've carried out a significant amount of work with similar premises, auditing and refreshing any action plans that we have outstanding within premises that type within the Dundee area. We are also, Paul will talk and give some detail later on priority 4 on unwanted fire alarm signals. We want to give a reminder and some assurance in what we're doing about the change to our approach to unwanted fire alarm signals in premises that do not have any sleeping accommodation within them. So Paul will give you some more detail in that, and we can answer questions at the end. So Paul, I'll hand over to you to give some more detail on the report for the committee.
Thanks, Eric Commander Shaw. So, committee, if I can direct you to page 11 and page 12 of your meeting pack, please. As Jason said, I've revised the way that we'll go through this to be a bit more succinct and pick up more of the detail within the performance management sections on each priority. So, within priority 1, accidental dwelling fires, we did see a slight increase up to 47 incidents, but that target indicator remains green, and I'll give more detail on that activity in the performance management. Non-fatal casualties saw a drop from quarter 2, sitting at 0, so that's obviously a welcome reduction. Priority 2, non-domestic building fires. Again, in the first indicator there, highlight indicator 4, we saw a reduction, which has brought that indicator from red to green. So we're now on target to be below the 37 for the year. And within that same priority, we have also got 0 within non-fatal casualties and fatal casualties. Priority 3, we have got a move from green to amber within the non-fatal RTC casualties. However, I'll go into more detail about the occurrences within that section. Priority 4, unwanted fire alarm signals. As Mr. Sharp's already said, I will go into detail around changes in that area for the committee within the performance management. And in relation to priority 5, we have saw a reduction in incidents, albeit the target indicators remain red. A very welcome reduction in both primary fires and secondary fires. 28 incidents in quarter 3 compared to 47 in the last quarter, and 81 incidents for secondary fires compared to 209 in quarter 2. So again, that's very welcome, and hopefully I'll cover off in the following pages the rationale and the reasons behind that. So if I can direct you please to page 14 of your meeting pack, the performance management in relation to improving fire safety in the home. The community action team continues to support operational crews to deliver planned home fire safety visits to Dundee communities through partner referrals across all areas of the city. We completed 168 high risk, 131 medium risk, and 75 lower risk within quarter 3. The number of accidental dwell fires was reported at 47 across all areas of the city. So despite this increase, further looking at the statistics, most of these incidents were very low impact, with firefighters not having to use any extinguishing medium. Most were removal from heat, and there was only 3 occasions where firefighters had to actually use firefighting medium, so that's encouraging. Firefighters took the opportunity to carry out safety education initiatives at all those locations, with follow-up thematic visits to surrounding properties to highlight good practice and fire safety behaviour. Crews also conducted a number of tenement safety checks for the removal of combustible items. The CAT team are also developing the strategy in quarter 4, where high-risk occupants will be targeted by the CAT team as opposed to operational crews, therefore enabling us to have a better success rate at carrying out those visits, because obviously the operational crews are subject to operational activity, and it's just further stranding out those higher risk occupants so that we can be assured that they're getting done as quickly as possible. I'll take you on to priority 2 on page 16 of your report. Improving fire safety and resilience in the business community. So our fire safety enforcement officers continue to audit the relevant premises within the scope of the Act, and myself and Jason were discussing earlier on that we're now back to pre-pandemic activity. So we're now looking at almost business as usual for us within quarter 3, and there are 42 premises were visited. that fall within the scope of the Act. We also did 3 post-fire audits across 3 completely different premises, a takeaway premise, an office and a shop. There were no patterns or trends identified within those businesses, and so our teams provided bespoke advice to each of those businesses on how they can manage the fire safety arrangements within their premises in relation to their duties. Also within the quarter, and it's detailed within Appendix 1, removable combustible materials in the run-up to bonfire night, buildings at risk or derelict buildings, project with partners. A success story out of that one will be in the West Market Gate, the vacant service station, which is now got fences and stuff around it, following a secondary fire there. So good evidence there of good partnership work. If I could take you to page 18 of your report, priority 3, minimising the impact of unintentional harm. So within quarter 3, SFRS attended 11 RTC incidents. That's a decrease from the same quarter last year and also from quarter 2 this year. It is showing red as it's on target to exceed that annual target, I'm afraid. Of the RTC incidents we attended during quarter 3, 0 fatal casualties were encountered. The total number of fatal RTC casualties for the year to date stands at 0, and so that's showing green. There were 7 non-fatal RTC casualties during the quarter, which is 1 higher than the previous quarter. However, only 1 of these incidents required firefighters to extricate an occupant that was trapped within a vehicle, and they were subsequently removed to hospital. This indicator is therefore currently showing green against the year-to-date figure for the headline target set. Crews completed RTC training and trauma care during this quarter to ensure operational preparedness and competency. And I'm glad to report that all pumps across Dundee now have state-of-the-art powered rescue equipment to replace the legacy hydraulic rescue equipment. That is an increase in cover across the city, and speeds up deployment and is safer for both firefighters and for occupants of vehicles. I'll take you to page 20 of the report, please. Priority 4, reducing unwanted fire alarm systems. So within our performance management, we were called out to 336 UFAS incidents. That's a reduction on 358 from quarter 2. We have the top 5 types of residents that were involved there. Top of the list, you'll see hospitals and medical care. 52 compared to 78 in quarter 2. However, it's worth noting that Nine Wells was responsible for a number of those, and the building is currently undergoing a replacement of its alarm system, its fire alarm system. So SFRS personnel are working very closely with the management team at the building to monitor that and provide advice. As Jason alluded to, you will all be aware, you'll have had updates on the SFRS strategy going forward for the reduction of UFAS incidents. The date for the go live for the strategy has been moved from the 1st of April to the 1st of July. There was an online engagement session today, was the first of the engagement sessions. That's been recorded, so that's for duty holders and businesses to engage directly with ourselves for advice. The event today was recorded and is available on the SFRS website, and that also contains frequently asked questions for duty holders to keep them advised on what their duties will be going forward. I'll take you to page 22, please. Priority 5, reducing deliberate fires. So, as I mentioned in the highlights, we have seen a fairly significant reduction in both deliberate primary and secondary fires. The partnership work that was ongoing from October leading up to bonfire night, I believe, will have certainly played some part in that, in partnership with Dundee City Council, Police Scotland. So the CAT team have been very proactive, working with partner agencies to reduce the number of deliberate fires that we attend. This includes activities such as weekly MATAC meetings, daily reports, which generates emails sent out to partners to specifically target spikes in activity, and as I say, that's done on a daily basis. Dundee CAT team also work with operational watches to reduce the number of deliberately set fires. One of the tactics is leaflet drops. The reports that we're getting are that these seem to be having a positive impact. Information being shared with Police Scotland, Dundee City Council, Anti-Social Behaviour Team, Community Safety Wardens, community officers from Dundee City Council, and that continues across all Dundee City wards. I'll take you on to page 23, priority 6, effective risk management and operational preparedness. So during Q3, firefighters on watches across Dundee completed training in extrication, breathing apparatus, casualty care, safe working at height, hazardous material training, animal rescue, railway incidents, and prevention and protection. We also conducted a number of operational intelligence visits to gather information on associated risks and hazards, and where necessary, put plans in place. Going forward, I will provide more information on specific and bespoke hazards, because these visits are extremely important for the preparedness of the crews in Dundee. I've added in some partnership training that's taken place over that quarter. So high volume pump training was delivered by crews at the Kingsway to demonstrate the capability to local crews and partners, with further sessions planned. Whole time and on-call personnel at Balmossy conducted joint confirmation road traffic collision exercise with Scottish Ambulance Service partners following a schedule of joint training sessions. Black Nest crews attended AirX22 at Dundee Airport on the 3rd of December with HIAL, Ambulance, Police, Coast Guard, Dundee Council, Tayside Aviation and the Chaplaincy, all contributing to a successful multi-agency exercise. Kingsway Swiftwater Rescue crews completed a joint off-station training event with Aberdeen Swiftwater Rescue crews, as it's not unforeseeable that these teams could end up working together. Another piece of ongoing work is a review on location and disposition of our specialist resources. We have a number of these in the Dundee City area. That includes vehicles like Command Support Unit that's currently at Blackness, and height vehicles across the city. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. I was actually in one of the community centres just a few days ago, and we were discussing fire and rescue and policing as well as part of my job, and somebody set the toast on fire, so we were visited by a team of guys in a big red machine. So that was actually quite exciting for most of the ladies that were there. And I'd like to pass on my thanks for their speediness, the fact that they came so quickly, they cleared the building, made sure that everybody was fine and let us all back in pretty quickly. So pass on my thanks for that. I'm having a look to see if, right, question from Daniel. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Convener. With regard to the information on page 25 about bonfire night and fireworks, can I first thank Scottish Fire and Rescue, police, council staff and other colleagues who have for all the work they've undertaken as a result of the situation in Girton at the end of October last year. Can I ask for assurances about preparations and partnership working so that the local community is confident that agencies stand prepared for October or early November coming this year. But further, I note that comments that visits were made to known shops who sold fireworks to provide advice and reassurances. And I was wondering what that advice was. Specifically, can I ask if the fire service has a position on the removing sales of fireworks across all local shops and large stores, given the concerns in the community?
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. So the first part of the question, to give you reassurance that following the events in November, October, November, there was a large-scale debrief which was facilitated by Police Scotland and partners. We attended that, and there was a full review of lessons learned for preparedness for next year. So I would think that we would be in a better position for next year. Hopefully that answers that part of the question. With regards the advice, I was not part of the team that engaged to reassure the shops and businesses in the area. However, I think that the advice would have been around about being sure that any fireworks that were sold were being sold to adults, etc., within the legal framework. I would think, and indeed any doubts on the competency or the intended use of those fireworks would be considered by the shopkeeper. We do not have a stance on, and we cannot advise on retailers and what they wish to sell. Jason, I don't know if you'd want to come in to add to that.
Aye, thanks, Paul. I'm conscious I've got Police Scotland colleagues on the call who have some other information to add to this, Councillor. So it's a really good question, and thanks so much for that. Just if I go back the way a wee bit to your first part of the question, what do we do about it? So we had a fire-related antisocial behaviour group established, and we met in October with attendees from a number of Dundee City Council's agencies, including Police Scotland, who were leading that. That included antisocial behaviour team, community safety wardens, children and families department, etc. So when we begun to experience some disruption, we met with these teams very quickly, and there was decisive action made on some of the traders, and actually, I'm sure Police Scotland will correct me here, but we withdrew the sale of fireworks in some premises. The second part of your question of what our stance is on removing the ability to sell fireworks, we have been reaching back into our national team on that question, seeking a national approach to it. We currently don't have one. From our perspective is if we were to cease selling them in this area, we may just push people into other areas of Scotland to procure them and bring them in. So it's maybe a question that we can feed back at a later date. However, Police Scotland may have a view on that matter just now, or when they're giving their update.
Thank you for that.
Next, we've got Bailey Keenan. Kevin.
Looked like Ross Fitzgerald was looking to come in if that was to help with the answer for Daniel.
Ross, you're not coming up on my screen, but you're welcome to come in if you want.
Councillors, maybe just to answer that question, well, it's kind of live in the discussions at the moment. So I suppose the parts that I would stress are that we've got really kind of good relationships with our local retailers, many of whom were extremely helpful in terms of the investigations and the aftermath of those events in Kirkton, and then also entirely cooperative with trained standards officials and our own staff who were in and around those shop premises at the time of the incident. So, you know, a huge amount of responsible activity from our local retailers aligned to that, who were kind of, as I say, helpful in terms of use of CCTV and various other options to identify some of those offenders. There are no charges. I would highlight in terms of the illegal sale of fireworks locally, in terms of the statutory kind of legislation. So for the most part, fireworks used that were legally purchased but then illegally used, which are two kind of separate matters for us. In the aftermath of the events in Curtin, again, we did see some additional intelligence, which is supportive of Scottish Fire and Rescue Service's position there around people travelling out with the city to go and procure fireworks in the aftermath of some of those retailers choosing to remove fireworks from their shelves, which effectively they did voluntarily and without kind of being forced or influenced by Police Scotland and others. So, we will certainly look at our engagement with our retail outlets locally as we move into the latter part of the year. But I would just look to reinforce the message that actually our retailers have been extremely kind of proactive and responsible around their approach to this and are very much on board with both ourselves and fire service activity to look at next year's event.
Thanks again. I'm pleased to hear that our local retailers have been behaving responsibly. That's positive news.
Right, Bailey Keenan's got
Okay.
a question. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. I'll maybe start with a comment. I would obviously like to thank the Fire Brigade for the efforts that they go to for us in keeping us safe. I think it's particularly appropriate, bearing in mind that one of your colleagues lost his life going along to an empty building in Edinburgh, and we've had our share of fires in empty buildings. So, tragic that someone lost his life, and my thoughts are with his family. And obviously the service that you deliver to keep people in Dundee safe is really welcome. I hope there's never another loss of life, but I realise the risk that you guys put yourself through, so much appreciated. The question is really around, I have a constituent who must have made a referral, or the agency that they work with that made a referral to yourselves for the potential of they're recognised by council to be overcrowded in their house. We sort of 5 children and 2 adults. So, but rather than concentrate on them as individuals, I would ask that how do you go along, address that, find an issue and report it to other agencies, and how do you follow them up to make sure that there's closeout and that there's a satisfactory result for the inspection that you've made, and you're able to say it's quite safe for you to be there from now on?
Thank you, Bailey Keenan. We have no powers within domestic property unless it's an HMO. But where we have concerns around any domestic situation, we have a referral system called an AP1. So firefighters who are welcomed into a person's domestic premises can report through that mechanism, and that is shared with all of the relevant partners, and those links are very strong, and I believe that there is feedback and follow-up on all of those concerns to ensure that action has been taken.
Okay, thank you for that.
I've got Councillor Crichton. Michael, you're next.
Thanks, Convener. My camera's playing up again, so I'll just be on the audio. Just a quick question about page 21 of the report. I know, Mr. Robertson, you went into detail, but I'm just looking into the kind of deliberate fires on those pages, both primary and secondary. I appreciate that, well, there's been a worrying increase in both over the past 4 years, and I really appreciate the kind of proactive approach that you guys are doing with your agencies and partners. But can I ask that the committee be given more detail on the specific actions the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and partners take, and how can that result in a positive action in kind of reducing the numbers of these such fires?
I wonder if I could come in first, Paul, if that's all right.
Of course, sir.
That's a really good question. I think when you look at our reports, there is just a highlight information there. It may be easier if I forwarded you on a full report. My community action team have kind of developed a full report on deliberate fire setting and what we're doing to address that collectively. Could I maybe just send it on privately for your information, or can certainly circulate it wider into this group if you so desire?
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you. Sure.
I think sending it round everybody would be helpful, because it would find a good use as we go through. Next, we have Councillor Short. Lynn, have you got a comment or a question?
Yes, it was just a comment. It very much echoes those of Bailey Keenan with regards to Barry Martin, who unfortunately lost his life a fire in Edinburgh, and just it brings home that very often we forget when we discuss things at a table like this that you and your crews every single day are putting their life on the line, and just how important it is that we do value everything that you do and appreciate also, and thank you for your service. It is incredibly important, and if you can please convey that back, that I'm sure the committee all agree that we're very fortunate to have such dedicated individuals looking after us and our safety. Thank you.
Jason, are you coming in?
If that's okay, just thanks so much for the comments that's been made tonight. And I think if you look at the report, for us, priority 6 is really important, because that's about maintaining our operational response and preparedness. So just to give you all assurance, that's a real focus of myself and our management team, and we're progressing some other areas to ensure we're strengthening the leadership capacity within the Dundee city area as well. So thanks so much for your comments, folks.
Jason, can I ask a question? It's loosely based on that as well. Empty buildings, derelict buildings, we've already spoke about them. Do you actually still get chance to go in and have a look around and make sure that everything is still in the right place for just in case there is a fire, and you've still got the plans in place for those buildings? Because I'd hate to see another death of a firefighter.
Yeah, so absolutely, as part of Paul's update, he talked about operational intelligence, and that's where we have got an electronic system within our appliances. It's demountable, so our crews go out and gather that intelligence, upload it onto the system, and we've got like, I know how it happens, but it gets onto that device on the appliance somehow, and they can demount that and use it in operational incident. What we also encourage them to do as well is seek vacant premises to go and do training. And that's something that Paul's progressing within the Dundee city area. So it's something that we speak to our partners about. If we got an empty premises, can we use that for training exercises? And that again reinforces that familiarisation with these areas.
Paul, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Billy Roberts. I just really wanted to echo Jason's thanks for the kind comments. It's noted and it will be passed on. And just to answer or to build on the answer that Jason gave you there, the work that's done in partnership now around about derelict buildings, the awareness of them, the action to secure them, the gathering of operational intelligence, and at a very local level, the community action team pushing out really significant information on individual risks to frontline firefighters has, in my experience, never been better. So I think hopefully we're in a good place with that. And the answer for derelict buildings, in my view, is that we get them secured or developed as quickly as possible because they do present a significant risk. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Councillor McHugh, Dorothy.
Thank you. And it's maybe already been answered. Is there a register kept of empty or derelict buildings across the city? You've maybe already answered that. Could you clarify, please?
I'll come in there. I think that we certainly know which buildings within each ward area are derelict or empty, vacant, present a risk. The CAT team are very proactive in that, but also partners within Dundee City Council and Police Scotland, community wardens are all actively keeping eyes on these buildings. So yeah, I think as I say, we're in a pretty good place. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right, I'd like to thank Mr. Sharp and Mr. Robertson for all the answers this evening. Now that you've had a chance to scrutinise and question this report, Can we please note this report? I'm not seeing anybody say no, so thank you for that. Veronica, do you want to move on?
Thank you, convener. Item number 3, Dundee Local Policing Area Quarterly Police Report, 1st of October to 31st of December 2022. This report is for your information.
Right, thank you for that. We have Ross Fitzgerald, Nicola Shepherd, and I'm sure Gregory Burns is also with Police Scotland this evening. So Ross, do you want to start us off?
I'll kick off, Ross, if that's okay. Convener, just introduce myself, Nicola Shepherd, Operations Superintendent for Tayside Division. Thanks for the introduction and good afternoon, everybody. I'm joined, as you've said, by Chief Inspector Ross Fitzgerald. I know you all know Ross is the local area commander for Dundee, and Inspector Greg Burns is with us, and Greg is our road policing inspector based in Tayside. Just before we introduce the quarterly performance report, I'd like to update on the Dundee Local Police Plan, if I may. As you know, the Police Fire Reform Scotland Act of 2012 requires Police Scotland to produce local police plans for each of the 32 local authorities in Scotland. So the Dundee Local Police Plan is due for review with effect from the 1st of April 2023. The plan, as you know, describes the main priorities and objectives for policing across Dundee. It'll explain the reasons for selecting the priorities and objectives within it, and it sets out the arrangements for delivery of policing to meet the priorities and objectives. I think, as you know, and Chief Super Davison's already outlined to the committee that the consultation phase for the development of the Dundee Local Police Plan commenced on the 3rd of November last year, and it's recently concluded on the 12th of February this year. The plan has been shaped by a range of views, data and assessment, including public feedback. You'll be aware that our local police teams have been out and about across Dundee, engaging with communities over several months now. We've also been gathering feedback from our Your Police survey, as well as partner and stakeholder views. So the draft plan has been circulated for consultation, and I know it's been shared with members up to this point. The intention would be to provide the final version of the plan back to the committee in March for consideration by members. Again, just in the interim phase towards that, I'd welcome any feedback you have in advance of the March meeting. Hopefully how you can feedback is in the correspondence that was shared with the plan, but if there's any dubiety over that or a need to contact us, then obviously come through myself or Ross, and we'd be happy to engage or take that feedback. So in terms of the policing report presented today, it covers Q3, as you've indicated, 1st of October to the 31st of December 2022. There's year-on-year comparisons from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of December 2021, and it also covers the 1st of April 2022 to the 30th of December. So that should be the 31st of December 2022, and it gives you some 5-year averages in there as well. Again, just similar to Jason's report, I trust you've had the opportunity to read the report. I will invite Chief Inspector Fitzgerald just to give a brief summary of the key points from the report that you'd like to bring to your attention. And just as part of Ross's opening comments, I know he would take the opportunity to introduce Greg Burns, and Greg's just helpfully going to outline some of the work in terms of the road policing portfolio taking place across Tayside during this quarter as well. So if in order, convener, I'll pass over to Ross Fitzgerald just to give you an update, and following his update, Greg's update, the three of us will happily take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Good evening, convener and committee members. Just to kind of touch on some of the highlights from the reports. I know you'll be anxious to get to questions, so I will pick out the kind of highlights and pass on to Greg quite quickly. But touching on serious and violent crime, I see our serious assaults and robbery rates are effectively static in comparison to last year in terms of occurrence rates. There's a slight decrease in detection rates, which you'll have noted through the report, albeit a number of live investigations from those crimes reported through Q3, which are still under investigation. We often find that serious assault and robbery investigations are some of the more complex investigations we tackle, and therefore can take several weeks to detect. We see similar drivers behind that crime type as we have in previous quarters, around perpetrators and victims being known to each other prior to crimes being committed. We see in the region of 25% of those crimes linked to domestic violence, and in often cases drugs and alcohol on the behalf of perpetrators and victims, often a significant causal factor and present at the time those crimes occur. Moving on from there, just to look at common assaults very briefly, a welcome reduction in the number of common assaults in comparison to last year to date, with detection rates very similar, and probably notably, again, a very welcome reduction in emergency service assaults of 14%, which I would say is aligned to our local activity, working closely with Custody Division to look at those higher risk parts of the custody process where emotions can be high amongst prisoners, and when we're dealing with them through the custody setting, where we've seen previously higher numbers of crimes, and also a welcome return to a full officer safety training programme, which was undoubtedly impacted by the COVID pandemic. So officers getting to really practice those skills effectively in terms of officer safety to improve confidence in that space. So all welcome reductions in terms of emergency service assaults. Moving on to the acquisitive crime part, a much more challenging picture and very similar to previous quarters reports. We've seen nationally acquisitive crime rates increasing, undoubtedly linked to cost of living crisis and fuel poverty and those kind of topics that we have discussed in this forum before. Welcome reductions in domestic house break-ins of 25%. However, that is balanced by increases in the commercial housebreaking area, where we have seen a number of kind of crime sprees committed by a small number of perpetrators, which are actively investigated by colleagues in CID. And moving on to motor vehicle crime, probably two types of crime aligned to this crime area. One with motor vehicles stolen as part of commercial house break-ins and then used to commit further crime, and another category where we see much more opportunistic offending with vehicles which have not been secured correctly, targeted, or also vehicles where high value property is in open display. So two different approaches there, with CID-led investigations into those more complex sprees, but a much more proactive approach to kind of public messaging around the opportunistic crimes and things property owners can do to try and safeguard their property from falling foul of that kind of criminal activity. I will leave the road safety statistics for the moment. As I say, Greg Burns is going to follow me just shortly, and we'll pick up on some of those statistics for me. So moving into the public protection space, again, some very positive returns in terms of an overall 20% reduction in numbers of reported sexual crimes, although we remain absolutely focused on those victims who do go forward to make sure that we are accessible and supportive for every single victim of a sexual offence who does come forward and contacts Police Scotland. And again, positive increases in detection rates across the Group 2 sexual crimes as a whole. Focusing in on rape just shortly, again, significant reductions in levels of reporting of around 20%, and we continue to see in the region of 30 to 35% of all rapes being historic in nature that are reported within the city, meaning although reported this quarter, have happened out with the last 12 months. And lastly, just moving into serious and organised crime, you see the drug supply statistics, an increase of 4% in terms of crimes recorded, which is absolutely in tune with our approach of tackling those who are seeking to exploit the vulnerable who are addicted to drugs and substances through their criminal activity. And we've seen a number of successful enforcement opportunities by both our Operation Argonite team and local serious and organised crime team are detailed within the context of the report for you. I'm probably not go into the statistics too much further. I would bring to your attention the antisocial behaviour part of the report, which again provides further information around the Curtin disorder incident which happened within Q3, and really for the first time gives some specific statistics in terms of the numbers of offenders that we've now identified and the approach to prosecution going forward. So hopefully those statistics are welcome and give a reassurance that a robust investigation has been delivered in the aftermath of that incident. And as colleagues in Scottish Fire and Rescue have touched on, planning for next year has already commenced by a real long look at the circumstances and preparation and planning for last year's event. So we take those lessons forward into this year. So I'll stop there. I'd like to introduce you to Inspector Greg Burns, who is our Roads Policing Inspector in the north of Scotland, with specific responsibility for Dundee as well. And he is going to give just a bit of oversight in terms of national strategic plans and projects, and also a little focus on how our national colleagues in roads policing are also responding to local incidents within the city. So I'll pass over to Greg, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chief Inspector, and thank you for the invite tonight. It's very much appreciated. As Chief Inspector says, I'm going to run briefly over the road safety element for yourselves here, and then take any questions at the end if you still have any. I think overall it's a really positive update for Dundee LPA. So obviously been said already, 0 fatalities for the year to date. We've got a decrease in serious injury road traffic collisions. We also have a decrease in slight injury traffic collisions, which is really positive going forward. You'll also see read in the report as well, we've got a decrease in speeding. This is down to a number of things, it's down to enforcement, warnings rather than taking enforcement actions, with education and a bit more proactivity around the area and around the city to obviously get the message through. Also a decrease positively in drunk driving. You'll see from the report there, we've carried out 1,859 breath tests and 189 drug wipes, which is really positive throughout the city as well. Obviously, it didn't help with COVID. We obviously ceased that for a bit, but we're back to running normally now with a number of offenders caught there. We had a decrease in careless driving, which is also very positive in the city. I think overall, road policing officers alone stopped 14,000, or just over 14,000 motor vehicles within the Tayside area, which is a significant amount of vehicles, and that's actually up in last year as well, which is really positive. Q3, a number of the national campaigns were run, which was obviously run in the city. With Tyre Safety Week, it's the speeding campaign, which is obviously focused on speeding in the city. Motorcycle safety coming to the end of the motorcycle season. Started the getting ready for winter campaign, obviously to educate folk about tyres, wipers, anti-freezing the cars, etc. And then we obviously moved into the festive drink driving campaign, which was run through the month of December. All of the aforementioned campaigns are linked to the Fatal Five, which is really important now. I suppose it's how do we go about going to our routes, and how do we establish where we're patrolling? Road policing Tayside have a number of priority routes. We've got 6 priority routes, and they're all selected through analytical data where collisions are happening, or fatals, or serious injury accidents, and that's how we manage where we obviously patrol, and that's where our focus is. The main priority routes, as you'll see from the report, are the A93, the A90, M90, A923, A85, A92, and lastly the A9. Many of the routes run through Dundee, and as such we're always on the routes as a matter of course. Moving on, there's been a lot of preventative work done in the Dundee area. We've got a number of campaigns which we run. Operation Close Pass, which is run in the Dundee area. We try to do one a month through the summer seasons, as it were. We've done one in Perth Road, Blackness Road, Riverside, and Broughty Ferry. However, beating the man sometimes, and this year actually the weather has been a real problem for the days that were planned. Moving on to that, we do the driver engagement, which is aimed at elderly drivers, older drivers. Bring the simulator in. We've had that in the Overgate, which was really positive. A lot of good engagement there. It's an opportunity for families that may be concerned about an elderly relative, father, mum, whoever it might be, driving. It gives them an opportunity to approach us and have some advice. We do the eyesight tests and stuff there as well, so that was a really positive engagement there. Rider Refinement's a motorcycle campaign. We basically take members of the public out, 4 police bikes, give them some advice, run through. We ran 8 sessions of that in 2022, getting through 96 attendees with an evaluation report back from University of Robert Gordon, which is really, really favourable, and we're looking to roll it out nationally now to the east and the west of the country. Linking with more Dundee events, we do a lot of antisocial patrols around vehicles in the Kingsway, the retail parks, we get a lot of complaints. And that's based on call demand. We'll send road police officers in at the time when we're getting the calls, and we'll deal with the matters effectively at that point. Now that can be exhausts. We get a lot of complaints about exhausts, which obviously make a car sound so it's going faster than it actually is. We'll deal with that. Car meets, which is really, really a big thing in Dundee. Initially this year I've used the drone for the first time, and that's reduced a massive amount of calls in respect of the car meet itself. We use unmarked vehicles, obviously we've got interventions there, which is really positive as well. We'll link in with Chief Inspector Cheryl's teams at night, and we obviously put ourselves in the right place at the right time so we can deal with these people. Mostly in the mornings, it's an area we're always in the town centres, whether it be Dundee, Perth or Angus. You'll see us at Claypots quite a lot, or Riverside Drive, getting folk stopped, into engagement, get some good positive engagement there. And that obviously highlights visibility. And it's obviously working because we've 0 fatalities and we've reduced both serious and slight accidents there, which is really positive. That's pretty much summed it up from my perspective, and I appreciate that's pretty much a whistle-stop tour, but that kind of sums it up for myself, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We've got questions from Councillor Craig Duncan first.
Thanks, Convener, and very interesting report from the police there, and pretty much brings me to the comment that I was going to make, that I'm sure that the police take no more pleasure than reiterating than I do in hearing previous advice they've given at past committees, that the cost of living crisis, and it is a crisis, is bound to increase certain types of crime. And I think some of the figures in this report just demonstrate that, and I can only hope that possibly higher up the political food chain than the likes of myself, those in a position to make a real difference about it, actually take on board some of your warnings. So my question would be around, there's been obviously, and I think because of the cost of living thing, a really significant rise in shoplifting in Dundee. And again, also you've touched upon motor vehicle crime, the acquisitive crime, that's gone up. And the one that I was really wanting you to perhaps expand upon, also another acquisitive crime type, was the really significant rise in fraud. I think you've helpfully explained it around the motor vehicle one. There's possibly measures that owners can do to help themselves about that. But with regard to fraud, I'm just wondering, is there anything that the public should be aware of, or any trends that they should be watching out for?
Councillor, thank you for your question on that. So the frauds is undoubtedly a complex kind of crime for us locally to tackle. Often those who are responsible for those crimes are working overseas and working collectively in organised gangs, and some of their scams are becoming increasingly more sophisticated and therefore more difficult for people to spot at times of initial contact. So we're continually pushing out proactive messaging around online safety. There is an awful lot of work around online safety pushed into our education establishments as well. And then each and every victim of a fraud is visited by a crime prevention officer from our local division, seeking to make sure that that individual then doesn't become the victim of a repeat instance of fraud, which can often be the case. We tend to find, often through embarrassment, particularly, that people are reluctant to report frauds potentially to the police, and are also very reluctant to discuss those matters with family members where money has been lost in circumstances where people have been duped. And we work hard to try and break down those barriers and build kind of support mechanisms around victims to ensure that when we're getting accurate reports that we can do something with to try and push into the enforcement space, but also that those individuals are properly supported. So, a huge amount of work done locally and also a real kind of national focus being brought to fraud as well now, looking at the kind of serious and organised crime aspect and pushing into that kind of cyber-enabled crime space to see how we can disrupt the activity of these groups to try and prevent offences before they occur. Fair to say that because of the overseas nature of them, then detecting these crimes after the fact remains significantly challenged, because often they're committed out with the jurisdiction of Police Scotland. But it really is a focus on prevention space and minimising repeat victims, where our focus remains both locally and nationally.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for that. And, you know, I think you're quite right. There's a limit to what Police Scotland can do with some of these international fraudsters and scammers. And I hate to use the word professional, but some of them really are quite professional, and lots of people fall for it. But I think the reassurance to take from what you've said is that, you know, to try and heighten public awareness. And also, I do like the fact that known victims are visited by officers. I think that's very useful indeed. So thank you for that.
And next, I've got Councillor Mark Flynn. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Can I also thank the police for their input there? It's very interesting. And thank you, Inspector Burns, for your detailed report on the road safety, because I kind of agree with everything you've said with regards to the report itself, as well as what Inspector Fitzgerald said with regards to the general report. I think is actually welcomed. Can I just maybe stick to road safety? If you can bear with me, Convener, I think it would be remiss of me not to ask the question as Bailey Dawson would have asked. Unfortunately, he can't be here this evening with regards to speeding in the city. Inspector Burns has touched upon the speeding, and the numbers have gone down, which is fantastic. But Bailey Dawson would also raise the issue with regards to speeding within the wards themselves, and what action has probably been taken within the wards, because I think that's a big concern for him in his area where he lives, where he notices that speeding within the wards has gone up, even though you've actually hit the main arteries. I think the concern would be in the wards themselves. And I just wondered if there's any action being taken to maybe focus on the wards themselves in the future.
Councillor, no, thank you for that question. I think it's a very valid question as well. We're kind of conscious of the fact that our national priorities remain around reducing road casualties, and clearly the biggest way to impact upon that is to target those faster speed roads where more serious injuries happen. But that's not to be naive or neglectful of the fact that speeding vehicles in our kind of smaller roads where there's parked vehicles, etc., can cause alarm and upset and have the potential to be dangerous too. So there's options around that. We often find in those kind of streets that it's not actually the speed of vehicles that's the issue, it's more the perception of speed, in that they may be not exceeding the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, but because of narrow streets, parked cars and vehicles, etc., then a vehicle travelling at 30 can often feel like it's going faster than it is. So we do deploy speed detection or speed average equipment in those kind of areas to try and get to grips with the average speed of each road when we do receive kind of multiple complaints, and we do kind of press into Greg's teams and our own local kind of community policing teams to try and deliver enforcement action in those areas where multiple complaints are received, and that's then backed up by that statistical analysis that supports the fact that a priority bit of attention is required in that street. So I suppose the part I would encourage is, local councillors to absolutely tie into their community policing teams and continue to highlight those issues, and certainly bring them directly to me as well, if that's a mechanism that you want to use. And that just allows us to strike that balance between, firmly focusing on reducing casualties, which absolutely needs to be the priority, but also listening closely to kind of public concern and providing a service to those who are affected within the wards as well.
Thanks very much for that. I'm sure you appreciate that answer, and especially as we're bringing in more 20-mile-an-hour zones within the city as well. So I think that'd be appreciated, and thanks very much for that. If you indulge me, I can go on to my own question now, if that's okay. As you know, we've actually put forward through the council in the last year or so the School Streets project, which has been ramped up around 7 schools with the School Streets project in position at the moment in place. We've got another 5 coming online. And I think it would be very important to actually fully understand, which isn't in this report, because obviously children's safety, which is mentioned within here, is vital. And this is what the whole scheme was all about, is making it as safe as possible in front of schools, with the really inconsiderate drivers that go around the schools dropping their kids off in what are very dangerous situations. So with these schemes coming in, we're actually seeing this improving slightly. I'd like to thank all the parents and carers, grandparents, whoever's taking their children to school, who are adhering to the rules in place at these schools where we've actually got this in position. My concern is we don't seem to have that under control currently. Could it maybe get from yourselves, Ross, or anyone else, have we actually issued any penalty notices, or do we have any information on how many warnings have been put out to drivers who have ignored the traffic regulation orders that are in place within the city and within these areas where the schemes are in place?
So, Councillor, I personally don't have those statistics to hand for tonight because I wasn't anticipating that particular question, but I'm more than happy to gather those statistics and have a further discussion with you out with this forum, if that would be useful to you, Councillor. What I can say is we're absolutely, you'll be aware that we participated in the launch of the Safer Streets initiative. As colleagues in roads policing units and our local community policing teams have given a proportionate response to enforcement in those areas, working closely with educationalists, head teachers, etc., to do our bit to make sure that initiative lands correctly. I'm also, I'm aware of some teething problems around the Safer Streets initiatives with some kind of illegal and inconsiderate parking within the margins of the areas where vehicles are prevented from accessing. So some other areas of additional kind of demand and concern that we also look at in conjunction with the zones themselves. So I saw Greg had his hand up there. I know Greg's teams have done some activity around that, so he maybe wants to just come in the aftermath of my answer there, just to give his own response. But as I say, a commitment to provide the statistics that you're asking for in due course.
Thank you. I said happy to meet with you and have a discussion in more detail as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, no problem at all.
Sorry, Inspector Burns.
No, it's no problem. I say just go on from what Chief Inspector Fitzgerald said, but send our teams out to numerous zones out there. There are some teething problems there. I know there's been a number of penalties issued and a number of warnings. One of the main things I think to take for this is actually sometimes teachers that we're actually catching that are late or running out. So it's one of these ones, but it's got teething problems there. We're certainly out, we're visible. And as Chief Inspector Fitzgerald said, it's a proportionate response we are, but there's more and more of these zones come about. Obviously got them in Angus and Dundee now, so just spreading the resource and working with the community to make sure we've got a visible presence there and making it work.
Thank you. Can I just finish off, convener, if that's okay, with a supplementary?
Be quick, Mark.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just following on for that, and the fact that you've touched upon Angus, I saw a tweet the other week there where Angus Police, for example, were actually tweeting they were going to schools there, and they were actually saying risking a fixed penalty of £50. So they're actually doing it in the Angus area. I'm not sure what we're doing in Dundee, so I look forward to getting the information. My concern is, I'll go back to the numbers. I've just had my officers go around, which I'll pass on the details to you. With basically, there's a number of schools we were seeing 150 vehicles drive into the zone in one particular school, 120 in the morning in another particular school, 160 in the morning in another particular school, just ignoring the actual regulation order, which is putting the children, I feel, at risk. And that was the whole point of this policy. So I'm sure that the officers within the council, we've done as much as I believe we can do, but I'm sure we can work together to ensure we can do it even better. And I think I'm looking for that to sort of help going forward, that we've challenged, you've done that with this number of people, you've educated, now we've actually got to take the softly approach way and that gentle touch, and maybe do a bit more action, I would say, probably going forward, if we can maybe consider that, and actually looking at fixed penalties to actually get that message out there. These schemes are there for a particular reason. This is children's safety. And I think I'd like to say, once we'll have that, probably have that discussion, Inspector Fitzgerald, and going forward from that. But I'll send this information on to you, so you've got it as well with regards to the schools, especially where the failure. It's not a ward issue for me, it's a city issue, and I think that's why I'm bringing it to the attention of the committee tonight.
That's grand, Councillor. I suppose just refer back to, there are positive statistics there in terms of road casualties for the city that I would probably reflect on. So I think that there are aspects of that we're certainly getting right, and as I say, absolutely committed to providing you the statistics you're looking for, and potentially looking towards some maybe joint external communication strategy between the local authority and ourselves to push forward that message in the future.
Thank you.
Councillor McHugh. Dorothy, you've got a question?
Yes, thank you, convener. looking at the summary table that you have on page, well, it's page 37 in my pack, which gives us the number of crimes and detection rates. I notice that on only 3 categories, detection rates have increased. 3 out of, I think it's either 13 or, yes, about 13. Especially pleased to see that it's that the detection rates increased for sexual crimes. Well done. But would you like to could you make some comment on why you think we've only had an increase in detection rates in 3 of these categories?
No, again, Councillor, thank you for the question. So I suppose just to touch on the statistics, so what I would say is that in a high number of categories where there is a minus or a failing to increase, we're talking about reductions of 1 to 2% over the course of the 3 quarters, because it is a year-to-date figure, which effectively is a static level of performance in terms of previous years, and those performance statistics remain high when compared to kind of national averages. The ones that are probably most pressing for me are around that kind of serious and violent crime space, which sit at -7% and -12%. And as I touched on them in my initial summary, there are those more complex crime inquiries, which can take several weeks and months to detect, so that there are a higher percentage of live crime inquiries still on the go in those kind of areas, and I would expect that detection rate to increase as we move forward. So, absolutely there is high levels of demand across the city at the moment in terms of policing. So those frontline officers who are answering your 999 and 101 calls are in fact the same officers who are investigating all of that bulk and acquisitive crime. So there is undoubtedly pressures on their time and on their kind of levels of performance in terms of investigating crime, driven by a need and a desire to ensure that our response to 999 and priority demand is absolutely up there as it should be. So I'm absolutely content that the quality of the investigations being delivered remains high. However, perhaps some of those investigations are taking a little longer in order to allow us to meet all of the broad kind of scale of demands that we see across the city. But on the whole, I appreciate there are a number of boxes where there are minuses, some very small minuses, which we would hope to improve going into Q4, but those that are maybe more substantial, perhaps explained by the complexity of investigations.
Thank you.
Councillor Short. Lynn, you got a question or a comment?
Yes, it's just a comment with regards to the wider picture. Obviously we come and we see you every quarter, but I'd just like to put on record thanks for opportunities like 4 of us took up recently, the opportunity to go to the drug education showcase, which took place at the Friday, and I believe that all 4 of us found it to be incredibly moving and something that came into the city due to Police Scotland, and hopefully will be something that's picked up with the city for that wider sort of conversation across Dundee, but also for the everyday, from the kind of antisocial behaviour in a tenement, which is looked after by my local policing team, right through to things like questions that I get about larger soccer games in the city and how you go about policing them. I always feel really confident that you're all there at the end of a phone and very, very keen to support everything that we do, and feel that it really is a partnership, and I really appreciate that you do come and allow us to speak to these reports and also get information from you. And again, like with the fire brigades, very much thanking you for the service that you deliver day in, day out. It's very much appreciated.
Councillor, those comments are very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynn. Next, we've got Councillor Hunter. Stuart.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the back of Councillor Flynn's comments about the Safer Street Zone. Some of you might be aware that several weeks ago, myself and other local members in the Strathmartin area were invited to a meeting of a parent council in one of the schools that's got one of the zones, as the parents were really unhappy about how it had been implemented at the start. And so first of all, I just want to thank Police Scotland for your response to the emails that I sent, and on the back of that, and some of the prompt action that was put in place to try and try and make sure that parents were behaving responsibly outside our school. However, I am aware that in the last week there's been an incident outside the school, not actually in the zone area, but just on the surrounding area, where a school crossing patroller was almost hit, or at least slightly hit by a car speeding through as they were trying to get kids across the road. And I believe one pupil may have actually been might have been involved as well. So while you're out there and we're looking at the whole, the actual zones that are closed off for traffic, can we also at the same time ensure that on the surrounding areas that we're looking at, ensure that there's no speeding and traffic is behaving responsibly where school crossing patrollers are, just to ensure that they're kept safe, and of course our young people and their parents are kept safe as they try to get to school as well?
Councillor, again, thank you for that question. But as I say, I mean, our overall kind of road safety strategy for the city is absolutely predicated upon trying to keep people safe, and that absolutely focuses on those kind of vulnerable road user groups, particularly children as they go to and from school. We understand the impact that children in the company of peers can have in terms of common sense focus on kind of crossing roads, etc., and all those kind of issues that go with that. So, absolutely, we would share your concerns around child safety coming in and out of schools, and our focus absolutely remains on reducing those casualties as much as we can, because even one accident involving a child is one too many, as I'm sure we would all agree. So, as I kind of reflect on the answer I given to Councillor Flynn earlier, the Safer Streets initiative is one that we've supported from the start. We'll continue to do that and deliver the kind of patrols you're looking for as often as we can, but based on a kind of proportionate need to look at where we're deploying resource kind of towards other activities as well across the city. But no, absolutely in agreement with your comments.
Okay, thank you for that. It's much appreciated.
I'm not seeing any more questions or comments coming in. So since we've now scrutinised and questioned this report, I would like to commend this, that committee note the contents of the operational report. Do you agree?
Agreed.
I'm seeing heads nodding this time, so thank you for that. Right, Veronica.
Thank you, Convener. Item 4, Protecting People Committee Annual Reports 2021 to 22. You have the reports before you.
Thank you for that. I'm pleased to be able to introduce this report covering the annual reports from the Protecting People committees from child protection, adult protection, violence against women, and the management of violent and sexual offenders. These reports represent a significant amount of work that has taken place during the period of 21-22, with the focus on preventing harm to vulnerable citizens. The Council have been a key contributor to these efforts alongside the public sector partners and the third sector. These reports set out in detail the progress that has been made in the area, such as development of trauma-informed responses to people at risk of harm, the better use of data and quality assurance information, and a wide range of practice and service improvements across the children's practice and service improvements, across children's and families, neighbourhood services, the adult health and social care. The reports also set out some of the challenges the Protecting People committees have actually managed to achieve this with progress, including managing resources, pressures and supporting the workforce to respond to increased demand for the services, the high level of risk and need. I'm delighted to say that the independent chairs for the Protecting People committees, Elaine Torrance, Anne Hamilton and Alan Small, have all taken time out tonight to be with us, and they would be happy to respond to any comments and questions that you have on this report. Right. Who's going to is anybody want to speak to this one? I'm looking around the screen and I'm not seeing any questions coming up either. This is actually a really, really good set of reports. Right, I've got Dorothy with her hand up this time.
Forgive me for putting my hand up. I've lost the chat again. It happens to me at every meeting. It must be something I do. Thank you for the report. I'm looking at page 87, section 4.4, future arrangements for annual reports, and I see that there's going to be combined reports going forward. Now, I think that sounds sensible to me, but I'm wondering, are there any concerns that the detail which was previously included, a lot of detail previously included in the individual reports could be lost if you're combining this into one annual report?
Diane?
Thank you, Councillor Hugh. Sorry, in the absence of anybody else coming in to answer that question, I think it's a very pertinent question and something that we'll need to work very hard to make sure that we get that detail. One of the things that we did this year was actually offered up elected members and IGB members an opportunity to attend a briefing and be able to put specific questions and hear information in more detail, which we don't always have time to do in the committees. So I would anticipate that going forward we would want to look at that. In addition, I think we're seeing a number of cross-cutting themes which are coming through, so there'll be an opportunity to respond to those in a way that actually addresses all of the issues right across all the partnership and the Protecting People forums. So it is something we need to be mindful of going forward, but I can see that Catherine's put her hand up as well, and she's the author of many of our reports, so I'd be happy to bring her in.
Thanks, Diane. We've been having a look at Councillor McHugh at a range of reports from other areas to try and get that balance right between having something which is concise but also doesn't hide the detail of a lot of work that sits behind that. I think one of the things that we're also having a look at is how we might format the report in a different way. I think sometimes we rely very heavily on written word, which can make our reports quite long, but we've had some really useful attempts over the past year or so working with independent chairs to do things like short filmed clips or audio so that people can, speak about the work that's been done, and often that allows us to describe some of the detail and celebrate that, but with a little bit less narrative and a bit less lengthy reports, which the public can often find quite inaccessible as well. So looking at different ways of producing and sharing that information is something that we're giving a bit of thought to. We've started our planning for the next set of reports just last week, so we're thinking about that at the moment.
Elaine's got her hand up as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the independent chair, if I haven't met you, of the Child Protection Committee and the Adult Support and Protection Committee. And I think this year and in previous years, we've been working really hard with all the independent chairs just to make sure that we're avoiding duplication, but we're working together as committees where it's really important that we do that. So I think the reports help to do that, but I can reassure you that within the committees there is still the same level of scrutiny and detailed look at these issues. So that is not being watered down at all. I think it's more the reporting and the way we can draw those connections together that's important. So I'd just like to reassure you from my perspective that I think getting that balance right, we're working together to make sure the links are there, but equally that we're not duplicating work and making sure that information is shared appropriately and we're working together. So just to make that comment, thank you.
Alan's next.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Alan Small and I'm the independent chair of Tayside MAPA SOG. And I guess it's the word Tayside that makes MAPA slightly different in the fact that it is a collaboration between Angus, Perthwick and Ross and Dundee City. Therefore, that and the fact that the Scottish Government current guidance dictates the fact that there will be an annual MAPA Strategic Oversight Group report will mean that that will have to be a standalone report. However, what will make perfect sense is to take highlights from that and pertinent facts from that and combine it with the Dundee specific public protection report. So slightly different because it has a Tayside-wide agenda. However, that doesn't. If you look at this year's annual report, you'll see there's there's Dundee specific information within it. So that doesn't mean it's a duplication. It would just be more taking that's relevant out of that Tayside-wide report and using it for Dundee.
And we've got Anne as well.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm Anne Hamilton. I'm independent chair of the Dundee Violence Against Women Partnership. Just to agree very much with what Elaine said there. I think the work that we've done over the past few years has really shown a lot of the connections between the different protecting people issues. And we've been doing more and more joint work, more and more joint planning. And I think that the opportunity to provide an integrated report is a really useful one. But I know that where there are individual issues, that we will make sure that those are still highlighted. And actually what it might mean is there's you've got a bit more focus on those rather than a lot of repetition. So, I mean, I would see it as a very positive thing, whilst at the same time, lobbying very hard for the specialisms and the experience and knowledge of the individuals to be reflected in the reports.
You okay with that, Dorothy?
Yes, thank you. That's been very helpful.
Right, we've got Fraser for a question, please.
Thanks, convener. I would just comment in relation to the reports before us tonight. I would actually compliment them on the quality and the readability of them, and the graphics for that matter as well. So I think they're actually very readable in their current format. So and if I could continue the compliments for just a moment, Diane mentioned the briefing, and I have to say I thought that was an extremely useful morning, and very grateful to all officers who contributed and the independent chairs too. I thought that was extremely useful. I've got a very specific question with regard to the information on page 119 of the substantive papers, and that's in relation rather to the development of a kinshare care team. I think that's a very welcome development. Now, I note from the information on the page 119 that between formal kinship arrangements and, if you like, the non-formal ones, we're talking about somewhere in the order of 400 children. And I was just really wondering, that's a significant undertaking for that team. And I was just really wondering if we could get some information on the size of the team, the amount of resource, if you like. Are the staff involved? Is that their whole focus? Their, if you like, full-time equivalent focus is solely on the kinship care team, or do they have other responsibilities? And is this an area where we may want to look for a greater resource? Because I think the initiative is an extremely good one, and I would just be grateful for some feedback on that.
Elaine?
Yeah, well, I was just going to suggest that Glyn came in and then Glyn's hand came up, so it's fine. I'll just pass over to Glyn for the detailed information. Thank you.
Right, Glyn.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Fraser. It's a very, very good question. And in essence, it's a team which provides added value, extra support over and above the mainstream social work teams supporting the children and young people in kinship care. So it's a ring-fenced separate team that provides dedicated specific support just to the kinship carers to try and help stabilise those placements. And it does that alongside the Tayside Council on Alcohol, Kith and Kin initiative, and again alongside a range of other third sector services. Going forwards though, kinship care, because we want to keep more children and people in placements with their families, kinship care is an absolute key priority. And to build capacity further, we will be exploring opportunities under the whole family wellbeing funding, which, as you know, was announced by Scottish Government last year, is available until March 2026, and will be allocated, we believe, at the moment, in early summer, late spring this year, probably in around early May.
That's very helpful. What's the actual size of the team at the minute, Glenn?
There's around about 5 staff in it. It's a mixture of social
Right,
workers and support workers.
Right. Well, certainly that's very positive feedback, and I'm grateful to hear about, you know, obviously further funding will obviously assist as well. So I'm grateful for that feedback, Glenn. Thank you.
Right, we've got a question from Bailey Keenan. Kevin.
Okay, thank you. Couple of questions I've got, probably they could be linked, I suppose. They asked the question earlier of the fire brigade when they went around and visited quite a number of people that are vulnerable in our city. And I'm wondering how that feeds into the various committees, because there must be a wide range or age groups involved in the vulnerable individuals that they come across, and wonder how you see the closeout or actions that are required for their visit, and whether that is a sort of catalyst for additional work to be done and reviewed. And can I also ask about the significant case review that is to be undertaken and report back in early 23 as to whether there'll be any further potential policy changes that we'll need to take into account because of that?
Elaine?
I can perhaps come in on that. It was really helpful, actually, because I've been sitting in the meeting today to hear the Fire Brigade's report and make the linkages there that you clearly made there as well. Yes, we did have a thematic fire death review. We had 3 individuals who were quite vulnerable, who all died as a result of a fire in their own homes. So therefore, there was a review undertaken looking at the kind of messages and some of the things that could make improvements in that, and that's contained in the report. So yeah, there was issues from a housing perspective, issues from home care. There's quite a range of people who are involved in that, and making sure that we get that the right working together, I think, in terms of that, and making sure that the risk assessment is properly done. We've also been looking at, from that review, about the equipment that's required to keep people safe in their own homes as part of that. So there's been a huge amount of work done. One of the things that we've done this year is being much more clear about tracking some of these actions out of these reviews and making sure that the actions are fully implemented, and also that if there's any outstanding, trying to identify the evidence base that it's made a difference to people in the city. We just reported back to the Chief Officers Group again on the fire actions out of the fire thematic fire review, and I'm pleased to say that the majority of those have actually now been completed. There's 1 or 2 where there's still got further work to do, but we are very, very mindful that whatever reviews tell us, that those improvements are made and actions are taken and followed through. So one of the things we've done this year is really look at the assurance that those actions are taken forward and they're all being addressed. So I think if that answers your question, I don't know whether Diane would want to come in a little bit more in terms of some of the actions from the fire thematic fire review, or whether that will kind of cover that area.
Happy to hear from you, Diane, but I think you've covered it reasonably well, and I'm pleased that there is that level of joint up working, that, you know, if they're doing a review, that we're going to put actions into place and make sure it is followed through. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to just confirm that Elaine's shared most of the relevant details. The only thing I would add to that is we're also looking as to how we work with our independent providers and our commission services to ensure that they have the same access to the kind of supports that they might need in protecting people from fire.
Diane, you switched off just before the end.
No, nothing else to add. Apologies.
Right. Okay. Elaine, is that a legacy hand? Right. Thank you. And we've got Lynn Short, Councillor Short.
Thank you. like Bailey McPherson, I'd like to thank everybody for the briefing. I found it incredibly useful, and I did have a large number of questions which were taken away, and thank you for all the officers and independent chairs that came back with the answers. It was really, really interesting to see them, and I'm delighted to learn that Authentic Voice is going to be going through the whole process. I think it's so incredibly important that we do listen and hear and talk with that authentic voice across the city, because those are the most important people, I think, and they know what the language is that they want to hear and understand. But also take this opportunity to say thank you to the independent chairs. It's not an easy task. Some days it must feel, my goodness, what have I got myself into? But it is very much an appreciated task, I'm sure, from all of the committee, that you do get involved. And I think we're all genuinely appreciative of the fact that your skills and expertise are allowing us to deliver for the city. We're not a city that shies away from the problems that we have, but hopefully we are cute and snazzy enough to come up with solutions and help to lead the way in Scotland when it comes to actually tackling the number of problems that we have. So hats off to you all, and thank you for another year of reports, and yes, making them nice and easy to understand. I love emojis at the start to show us just in what way we're heading, so thank you.
Elaine?
Could I just respond to that and say thank you very much for that? It's much appreciated, and I always find Dundee City a fantastic place to work with, and some of the staff are fantastic too. So you know, it's a kind of two-way process. I think we probably get a lot of benefit from working together. So hopefully that will continue for a time to come as well. I'm just going to say one thing, because I'll be remiss if I don't, but today, just to draw to your attention, is Adult Support and Protection Day today. If you haven't seen it, it's been, I think there's been lots of publicity around it, but just to note that today, and the focus has been on neglect and self-neglect. And I just kind of was aware of the comments earlier about the cost of living crisis, and just to note the impact of that, actually, not just on adult support and protection, but actually on child protection as well. You know, families are under pressure for a range of reasons. And I think, you know, we're mindful of that, and the work that we do moving forward, support to these families and to adults is really, really important. So I just wanted to make sure that the committee were aware Adult Support and Protection Day only comes round once a year. So just to kind of make you aware and help us raise the profile, I guess. That's really useful. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got Councillor Anderson. Heather?
Thank you, convener. Just one comment. I was at a meeting today with the Dundee Federation of Tenants, and we had a really nice conversation during the day about tenants being concerned about other tenants. And we were talking about doing a newsletter to go out to tenants later in the year, but just that whole thing of, if there are tenants concerned about someone on the stair, where should they report that to? You know, who could they get in touch with to ask somebody to go and check out that someone is all right? Because there were tenants there talking about going to somebody's stair and chatting on the door to make sure they were fine. So it's just, if you've got any advice about the best way of dealing with that, I could certainly pass that on.
Diane, you want to come in?
Diane?
Thank you, Heather. Generally, what we would say is that people would phone a team like the first contact team, or come through to like my office, just to kind of report if it's coming from yourselves. So normally what we would do is ask the first contact team to look into that as almost like a referral. Sometimes it's difficult if and we don't always have the right details. We don't always, if it's someone on the close, for example, we'd need to kind of have a sense and understanding of how to make contact with that person, but that would be the best first point of contact in order to get some advice, and then the team would be able to take it out from there.
That was a big thumbs up from Heather, so thank you for that. And I'm not seeing any more questions at this time, so can we note this report? I'm seeing heads nodding, so thank you for that. Veronica?
Thank you. We now move to item 5 on the agenda, Antisocial Behaviour Report, 1st of October to 31st of December 2022. This report's for your information.
As you see, this is an overview of the reporting figures for Neighbourhood Services Antisocial Behaviour Team for the period October the 1st to the 31st of December 2022. Are there any questions on this report? I'm not seeing any questions. So can we note this report?
Heather's got a question, I think.
I think Heather was from the last one.
Sorry, sorry,
No, I don't think so.
Convener. I was thinking about asking a question, but I didn't want to take up too much time. It was just the point about cases being reopened, and it says in the report that that is recorded from Q3 because that's when that data became available. So I just wanted to check, because I'm not as familiar with these reports as other councillors. Is that a new data that we're recording, and what is it telling us?
Elaine?
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Councillor Anderson, for the question. This is something that came up at one of the briefings that elected members may be interested in, so we look to incorporate that in future reports going forward. I think it gives you a sense of not just the new cases, but some cases that can recur as well, so it's just to give you that fuller picture.
Is that okay, Heather? Yep, thumbs up from Heather. So will we agree this report? Right. Yep, definitely this time. Yes. Right. Thank you for your attendance this evening, and I'll catch up with you all soon.
Thank you, Convener. The next committee is the Neighbourhood Services Committee.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Neighbourhood Services Committee, and we've got 4 items on the agenda this evening. I'll hand over to Veronica to take us through the agenda.
Thank you, Convener. Item 1, Declaration of Interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
None that I can see. Just put the chat. Just make sure I've got the chat on. Next item, Veronica.
Thank you. Item 2, Housing Allocation Policy Consultation. You have this report for your approval.
Okay, this report seeks the committee's approval to make proposed changes to the housing allocation policy, and it gives the committee an update in respect to the consultations that have been carried out. The changes will bring the housing allocations policy for the council and the Common Housing Register partners fully up to date with national best practice. The current housing allocations policy was last reviewed in 2016, and there have been several changes to the legislation and guidance since then. So as I've said, this will bring us up to date with national best practice. As part of the review, the Council consulted widely with individuals, community groups, residents, tenants organisations, registered social landlords, staff and other key stakeholders on the proposed changes. The 3 key changes are: 1, making a higher award of social needs points in relation to cases of domestic abuse, racial abuse and severe harassment. The second change is to introduce a 2-offer rule for all applicants, including those presenting as homeless, who presently only receive 1 offer. And the third change is to make use of application suspensions under Section 6 of the Housing Scotland Act 2014. So that allows social landlords to suspend housing applications in certain circumstances, but it also ensures that there's very clear communication with the tenants who are the subject of those suspensions. By making the proposed changes to the policy, we can prioritise the applicants with most housing need and provide more support and advice directly to all the applicants who need it. The adoption of the two-offer system will also help us offer properties more quickly to applicants and speed up the entire process. There was an elected member briefing on Friday last week with a number of questions being addressed, but I'd just like to see if anyone has additional questions. I can see Councillor Duncan does have a question.
Yeah, thanks, convener. And yes, like yourself, I was at that briefing, but since then a question has popped into my mind, and it's around about the otherwise probably reasonable two-offer rule. I'm just thinking, like in real life, there may be, for example, off the top of my head, you know, reasons that emerge around, say, mobility issues or other such factors, which might actually lead to someone being viewed as, you know, two offers being, you know, a bit too harsh, is what I'm getting at. Is there any kind of latitude in such cases to go to more offers than just two?
I'd be happy to bring, I think it would be Louise who I would bring at this point. My understanding is all the applications are reviewed annually to make sure they're up to date, and after a first offer has been refused, there's a lot of work done with the tenants to ensure that we're being accurate in the assessment, but I'll bring in Louise to explain what we would do if it was more complicated.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson, and thank you for the question, Councillor Duncan. I think Heather pretty much summed that up there in terms of what we would be doing. So there are annual reviews, and I think what's important is when there's a medical assessment carried out, that's submitted back to the Lettings Centre so that the application is then updated to reflect those medical requirements, and then the allocation made would be subject to meeting those medical requirements.
Councillor Duncan, is that?
No, I think that's helpful. It was just able to get clarity in my own mind. I think I mentioned the other day at the briefing that it might just be, in my experience, but some applicants seem to like resile from going down the medical assessment route. I don't know if they just think it's too difficult or won't help them. So that's all I was really getting at, that how flexible can we be?
And I think the motivation here is to make sure that we make an offer that's accepted because we've got the right information and not waste time in the process. Thank you. Bailey Keenan, I see you have a question.
Yeah, can be asked, couldn't make the briefing, but a question around, you suggest that reducing it to two offers will reduce the time that the houses lie empty. How much time do we think that'll take off the days to let? Because at the moment it's probably somewhat ridiculous length of time that properties are lying vacant, and it's money not being earned to the housing revenue account.
I'm not going to attempt to ask, I mean, we did ask that question, and I know Louise has done rough estimates, but I will bring her in. I think it was, you had the number of days that would be saved if we implemented this rule. So if you could inform Bailey Keenan of your best guesses.
Thank you for that, Bailey Keenan. So for context, there was approximately 1,000 refusals in the previous year. And in terms of multiple offers, there were 537 applicants who had 2 or more refusals in the previous year. So if I solely look at the 537, I'm conscious that not everybody will typically take 5 days to determine whether or not they accept the offer, and that will vary. But if we were to assume that everybody did take 5 days to refuse an offer, that's an additional 2,685 days on our days to let, that would be added to it.
I take it the answer is it's 5 days it saves you, because it will not be 200 and odd, you know, the hours that you've got will be, you know, so potentially 5 days, I take it.
On average per offer.
Yeah, on average per offer. And so if we were offering 3, it would save us, yeah. Does that explain it? Yeah.
We'll see it filtering through in other reports.
Yeah, hopefully at the best value group. I've got Councillor McHugh.
Thank you. I did have a number of questions on this report, but officers have very usefully answered most of these for me. One question I do have relates to Appendix 2, where there's two categories of homeless: statutory homeless and threatened with homelessness, and they appear to have the same points allocation. Now, I would have thought that if you were statutory homeless, i.e. you are homeless, you know, that's a more difficult situation to be in than being threatened with homelessness. Should there be any difference between the number of points allocated here?
And do you have a second question, Councillor McHugh, to whether you want to ask all your questions at this point?
No, most of my questions have been answered, thank you, by officers.
Thank you. Louise?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor McHugh. In terms of those two scenarios, so you're correct. What we'll do is we'll anyone who is at risk of or who is homeless, they are assessed under homeless legislation, and that's the way in which the points have been, the category group has been collated. So both of those scenarios would award 70 points. And I think what's important to note is that at risk of being homeless is someone at risk within the next 3 months. So that's why the points are similar, because the 3-month period is in which we would look to target and ensure that where we can prevent the homeless, then we will, but where we can't, that they're already assessed and awarded the same level of points with a view to rehousing as soon as possible.
Yeah, and also, Louise, I know because I've been involved in this, there has to be clear evidence that there is a real threat of homelessness. It's, you know, so it's backed up with evidence to show that it's definitely imminent. I can't see any more questions. So are people happy to approve this change to the policy? Thank you. Veronica?
Thank you. We now move to item 3, tenders received by the Head of Housing and Construction. This report is for your approval.
This report is detailing tenders received which ensure that the supply of electrical, trade, building and timber materials and consumables as listed will continue to be procured compliantly and secure best value for the council. Are there any questions? Nope, I see no questions. Are people happy to approve? Thank you. Veronica?
Item number 4, tenders received by the Head of Design and Property. Again, this report is for your approval.
Okay, and again, this report recommends that you approve the acceptance of a range of tenders for new door entry systems at Ancram Place, Morven Terrace and a range of other properties, window replacements, roof replacements, copper pipe stacks replacement, remedial wall works and timber fencing work. Are there any questions? Well, happy to accept the tenders. I think, Veronica, we've made a record, so I'd like to ensure that future neighbourhood services meetings are as swift as this one, and would like to thank you and pass on to the next convener.
Sorry, convener, I think that Councillor Crichton has a question.
Oh, sorry, many apologies, Councillor Crichton.
No worries, it was just a comment, convener. Just to comment that I'm very pleased about the control entry for the 4 blocks at Morven Terrace and Ancram Place in the sheltered housing complex. And Billy McPherson and myself had held meetings about this issue with tenants, about the antisocial behaviour, and this will go a long way into assisting. So yeah, just very pleased to welcome that.
Okay, echo your comments. Thank you very much. No more comments, so I will now close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. The final committee this evening is the Policy and Resources Committee.
Good evening, colleagues. We'll just kick on with the business. Willie?
Okay, thank you very much, convener. Firstly, are there any declarations of interest?
Anybody have any dying urge to declare an interest? I'll take that as a no. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. There being no declaration of interest, I would like to advise the committee that requests for deputations to address the committee have been received. The first deputation is from Mike Arnott from Dundee Trades Union Council for item 2, defend the right to strike. And the second has been received from Laura Young, lead campaigner in relation to disposable vapes for item 3 on the agenda. Is the committee minded to hear the deputations?
I certainly am, and I can see nodding heads, so we'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 2 itself. Mike, I feel the need to say welcome back. You've not long left, mind you. They do say that nobody ever fully retires, and you are proof in terms of illustrating that point. But thank you very much for coming tonight, and thanks for your patience and getting to this point in the evening. You know your way around committee, but just as a reminder, we've got 7 minutes to which to address committee, and then if you can hold on for any questions that elected members might have. But the floor is yours, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks, convener. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yep, I'm Mike Arnott. I'm speaking as Secretary of Dundee Trades Union Council, a body which was founded in 1867 and which represents thousands of affiliated trade unionists from 9 trade unions and multiple union branches across the city. And I'm speaking in support of Councillor Shears's motion to defend the right to strike. Councillors may have been aware of a protest rally of over 300 in the city square, which took place at 1 p.m. on Wednesday, the 1st of February, as part of the TUC and Scottish TUC's UK-wide Day of Action against the Westminster Government's proposed strikes brackets minimum service level bill. The protest included workers from unions Unite, Unison, GMB, EIS, CWU, PCS, FBU and UCU, from local government, fire and rescue, the NHS, the universities, the communications sector, transport and from the civil service. This bill would allow ministers to impose regulations on any services within 6 sectors: health, education, fire and rescue, border force, nuclear decommissioning and transport, and that would force designated workers to work during strike action. Employers can then issue work notices naming who has to work and what they must do. Workers could be sacked, and unions face huge damages claims from employers if they fail to comply. First in the firing line apparently will be ambulance, fire and rail workers, with the government seeking to rush through new rules by the summer. We believe this new law to be undemocratic by forcing workers to cross picket lines and work, even if they have voted to strike in a legal ballot. It's counterproductive in that the government's own analysis has warned that it could lead to worse industrial relations and more strikes and industrial action short of striking. And it ignores the steps that workers and their trade unions already take in local negotiations with managements to ensure that essential cover is in place during industrial action, as happens, for example, in Dundee City Council, and which has happened in UK sectors where industrial action is currently taking place. The threat of dismissal for workers who take action over their pay and conditions will do nothing to resolve staffing shortages in public services. It could punish striking ambulance workers who are taking a few days industrial action, but it does nothing to resolve shortages in ambulance provision which put patients at risk throughout the year. It could see the sacking of nurses, one of whose organisations, the Royal College of Nursing, has not previously taken industrial action in their 107-year history, but it does nothing to address the staffing and workload issues which make their pay and conditions so intolerable. The government is effectively saying it can do nothing to reduce the risks to patients caused by underfunded services, but can potentially fire health service workers if it's unhappy with a temporary reduction in service due to strike action. It ignores devolution. Workers in Scotland and Wales in devolved services such as health, fire or education will be subject to this legislation, and they and their trade unions could face punitive sanctions due to actions imposed by Westminster ministers with no reference to to Holyrood, Cardiff, or Stormont. Ministers claim they are following similar systems in France, Spain, and Italy, but this is untrue. The European TUC says the UK already has among the most draconian restrictions on the right to strike in Europe, and the UK government's plans would push it even further away from normal democratic practice across the continent. It weakens protections against unfair dismissal and freedom of association in ways that violate international labour organisation standards. And I would remind councillors that George Nicol Barnes, born in Lochie High Street in 1859, was instrumental in the founding of the International Labour Organisation in 1919, and also that the British government is a signatory to its standards. In January, the Prime Minister told Parliament the ILO supports minimum service levels. They're present in France, Italy, and in Spain. And then Grant Shapps added Germany to the list and claimed the ILO regards minimum service levels as a proportionate way of balancing the right to strike with the need to protect the wider public. This is not true. In France, minimum service laws simply require 48 hours notice of transport unions to strike, or 5 days notice for health workers. In the UK, the law already requires 2 weeks notice of industrial action, plus an extra week to tell the employer before a strike ballot, and that ballot must be by post, often taking 4 weeks. The French right to strike is individual. There is no sacking or suing involved. In Italy, minimum service levels are agreed in collective agreements with unions. There is no right of the government, let alone an employer, to force people to work or else sack them or sue the union. In Spain, the Constitutional Court tightly controls all limits on the right to strike for strictly safety or security reasons. In Germany, unions make collective agreements for minimum services, and only when an agreement cannot be reached may a court step in. It's not a government minister or an employer who has the power to decide. You simply can't legislate away dissatisfaction. Workers taking industrial action today have endured the longest wage squeeze since Napoleonic times. Workers in the public sector have seen their wages fall even further behind those of other workers. Public sector pay rises are currently running at less than half the rate of those in the private sector. For example, some nurses are earning £5,000 a year less in real terms than they were 15 years ago. For midwives and paramedics, this rises to over £6,000. This bill will do nothing to help those workers or to resolve current industrial disputes. And it will do nothing to support those using public services who are seeing the consequences of a decade of austerity. The Welsh Government is opposed to this damaging and unnecessary bill, damaging because the bill is being rushed, lacks detail, and interferes with devolved public services. Unnecessary because the bill will do nothing to resolve industrial disputes. Scotland's First Minister has pledged to fight the proposals, quote, every step of the way. With little details or safeguards, it gives ministers blunt powers to set unspecified minimum service levels during strike action, which undermine existing national or local negotiated arrangements. The bill grants virtually unlimited powers to the Secretary of State to determine the minimum service levels and the employer to apply them. Clause 3 of the bill gives the Secretary of State the power to amend, repeal, or revoke any provision made by primary legislation passed prior to this Act. The government's desire to rush through this bill will shorten timescales and minimum time for scrutiny, debate and consultation, and will undermine the role of Parliament in providing due diligence and creating fair and reasoned legislation. I call on City Councillors to support Councillor Shear's motion and reject punitive, ill-considered and draconian legislation as a method of tackling the industrial reaction of workers to reduce pay and working conditions. It will resolve nothing and will create greater industrial relations discord. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that very eloquent, honest and robust contribution to tonight's discussion and debate on this, Mike. Really appreciate it. I can see we've got a couple of questions. If I can just kick off though, Chair's prerogative, of course. You talked about the practicalities, which I think are really important, and you're right. You know, in my view, this is an attack on the democratic rights of workers first and foremost, and their ability to be able to articulate and air their concerns in a meaningful way through the ability to strike. Can I just ask, what's your sense of how those individuals who will be affected feel? You know, how they feel about that, and also what your sense is from the kind of public opinion, I suppose, as a barometer on the proposed legislation, as you've mentioned.
I think people feel bad enough to go on industrial action in the numbers that they are at the moment. I mean, people are losing wages across the country. This is a last resort. Industrial action is always a last resort. The government's inability to recognise that fact is one of the reasons why we're still in the position where we are. So the fact that they are taking a last resort initiative by taking strike action and now face even further potentially punitive action, which could result in people being sacked, despite the fact they've taken part in a democratic vote to take that strike action, is astonishing, and it's being reflected through their trade unions and the reaction that this has generated at a national level. And the public response we got at that rally in the city square on the 1st of February is an illustration of the way that the public see that. I mean, they were quite supportive and have been quite supportive of the workers who have been taking strike action. To see there being legislation now proposed, which will further impinge on that right to take industrial action, will do nothing to resolve the current situations which are happening, and will, in my opinion, be reflected by further public support for the workers involved in these disputes.
Thanks very much, Mike. Certainly agree with those comments. I'll come to Bailey Sawyers next. Willie?
Yeah, thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mike, for coming along on this very important topic. A number of the services you referred to, such as the ambulance service and the fire and rescue service, are of course devolved to the Scottish Parliament, but as you'll be aware, unfortunately, employment law is reserved to the UK Parliament. I'm assuming that this would really cut across the Scottish Government's ability to negotiate with trade unions during strike action, therefore, or during industrial action, or claims, rather.
Yeah. What would be the case would be that there might be negotiations going on at a Scottish level between the Scottish Government and trade unions, which is suddenly thrown into total disarray by a Westminster minister stepping in and imposing potential restrictions on those workers. And this could be during negotiations. This could be while things are at a delicate stage, and kick the ball on the slates for the whole situation. It's still not clear, Willie, because they're rushing this through. There are still so many gaps. It's been ill thought out. It's been rushed. There's been little time for scrutiny and debate. There's been little consultation. And because of that, there are gaps, there are worrying gaps, and there are the kind of dilemmas that you've alluded to being thrown up left, right, and centre.
Could I ask a quick supplementary, if that's okay?
Of course, go for it, Willie.
Under the and this may be something else the Tories get rid of, but under the European Convention of Human Rights, do employees not have the right to withhold labour?
There is actually no legal right to strike in the UK. With the European legislation, the review of that's taking place, there are real concerns that this is also a double-pronged attack, with the lack of scrutiny on the regulations from Europe, which are currently going through Westminster, that important trade union rights and workers' rights legislation and European regulation that previously covered the UK will not indeed be replaced with supplementary legislation to cover the UK after these regulations no longer apply. So that is a double whammy, if you like. Not only is there further legislation coming in, but there's the chance that existing European regulations will not be supplemented by UK legislation when they're removed by the government.
Thanks, Mike, and
Thanks for that. It's a rather depressing answer.
Indeed. I'll come to Councillor Malone next. Charlie?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be any surprise to anybody in this chamber or in the room, sorry, virtually, that I'll be supporting Councillor Shear's motion wholeheartedly. I think Councillor Alexander mentioned something I think that's quite important. We understand this is not just about an attack on people engaged in lawful industrial action. It's an attack on democracy. Let's not pretend it's anything other than that. The Conservatives have made it quite clear that they are about to attack trade unions. There was even proposals and discussions that they could actually sack people for joining a trade union in certain key sectors. So this is an ideological crusade. It's an ideological attack on working people. And I agree, Mike, nobody wants to go on strike. I've had too many occurrences in my life where I've been on strike, and I could tell you it's utterly miserable. Nobody wants to do that. But what we've not got in place is any kind of mechanism that allows workers to restore parity. We've had 10 years of austerity. I looked at one statistic, and I think that we're, in terms of stagnation of wages, we were second worst only.
Sorry, I really don't want to interrupt your flow, but questions to the deputation. So if you've got a question for Mike, if that's
I'm just coming to it.
I'll
just finish that wee bit of preamble. We're as bad as we're second worst only to Greece. My question to the deputation, as Councillor Alexander reminded me, I was on for one of my rants, is you've been a loyal servant, not just to the trade union movement, Mike, but you've also been a loyal servant to Dundee City Council. Do you detect what we're seeing in the universities, that people are now no longer choosing the jobs in the public sector in particular because of the wages and conditions? And do you think that trend's going to increase in the future, which will make it harder and harder for us to get the skills we need to deliver first-class services? Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Charlie. I think retention is a major issue. I think everybody is speaking about that across the public services, not just in local government, but in the civil service, and not least in the health service. The figures I gave about the reduction in the standard of living of nurses and paramedics is an indication of that this recent inflation has really been the straw that's broken the camel's back as far as the reaction's concerned. But one of the things about not addressing that is not for greed or for individual greed. It's a genuine concern amongst thousands and thousands of public sector workers about the current condition of their sectors. And particularly if you're looking at something like health, but as I said, it will affect other public sector areas as well. The need for retention of staff when they're seeing their colleagues walking out the door, either retiring early, leaving employment, or being poached by better pay and conditions in other parts of the world. This is a real concern, and it's all joining up into a storm which we're seeing on the streets and on the picket lines at the moment.
Thanks, Mike. And Charlie, you know, I'm always happy to hear your very eloquent rants on such subjects as this. And you'll get another opportunity in just a moment. But before that, I can see no other questions for you, Mike. So thank you very much. I'm just going to pop you on mute at this point, and then we'll go to the substantive item, and I'll hand straight over to Councillor Shears. Pete, if you want to speak to your proposed motion, and if committee services could circulate that as well, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Enviable task of following Mike Arnott and Charlie Malone talking about trade union issues, but here we go. And thanks to your group as well for taking this on as a joint motion. As has already been said, the attack to the right to strike, it's an attack on workplace democracy. No one wants to be on strike. It really is a desperate last resort, but it's a vital last resort that we cannot deny people. And there was a day in Dundee in the summer where you could visit 7 different picket lines, CWU, Unite in all their forms, and the UCU. And even now we still have regular pickets in the city with the Royal Mail, teachers, university lecturers, and the fire service still fighting their own fights. And we are a city that's steeped in trade union history, and uniquely for Dundee, a trade union history that has been led by women. And that's continuing to this day with our own Pauline Rourke, currently president of STUC. And we owe it to the workers currently on strike, those who are about to strike, and those who took action in the past for the betterment of the city to strike. If it wasn't for workers down in tools years and years ago, we wouldn't have the fundamental working rights that we enjoy today. The weekend, the 40-hour week, paid leave, maternity leave, to name just a few, that were won through strike action. And you only need to look at the workers' rights situation in the States to see the difference that a strong trade union movement makes against a country that has never enjoyed workers collectivizing and fighting for improvements. As well as being an attack on the right to strike and workplace democracy, it's an attack on trade unions in general, which has just been a hallmark of successive Tory governments. They've always been terrified of working people coming together and standing up to them. And throughout the cost of living crisis, we've seen that it's not been politicians making the changes and winning the fights where they have been won. It's always been trade unions. The idea that the minimum service levels are there to protect the public, it's nothing but a smokescreen. It's a very convenient excuse that the Tories are using yet again to try and destroy trade unions. Thatcher tried it, Cameron tried it, and now Rishi Sunak is trying it. I'm also quite proud to see that most of the MPs and MSPs who represent Dundee in the North East, with a couple of blue exceptions, are speaking out against the bill, and the commitment of the Labour Party to repeal the bill when we win the next general election. But as a council, we need to make our commitment to workplace democracy abundantly clear. It is an essential right, and it's one that should never be put under threat. So committee, I ask you to please approve this motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pete. I'll go straight to Councillor Tolan next. Siobhan?
Thanks very much. Just going to bring my notes up. Give me 2 seconds. You know, immediately after Brexit, you'll probably recall that one of the first things the Conservative government did was to try and bypass the UK Parliament to push Brexit through. You'll probably remember that they were dragged to court to actually bring the UK democratic system back into that process. And for me, that has set the tone of absolutely everything that has come from then, because the post-Brexit society that we're now living in is a constant drip attack on our democracies, and trade union rights being definitely one of them. I'm really, really happy to second this motion. I'm really, really happy that the SNP have joined with the Labour Party to do this, because some things are bigger than party politics. This is absolutely about the right of people to strike, the right of people to have a trade union, and the right of people to be represented in any way they see fit, actually. One of the things that I want to talk about, though, is it's not just an attack on the trade union, because it's coming hand in hand with the attack on actually our workers' rights and our rights within the workplace as well. If you look at the retained EU bill, for instance, the Scottish Government's report is actually quite good in this. And what basically that means is all the existing EU legislation will be replaced, or not, but replaced with anything the Conservative government now sees fit. So that is causing a lot of concerns within the union movement and within the kind of Scottish Parliament as well. So things like the 48-hour working week, you know, the rights to maternity and paternal leave, all these things are under threat. So in addition to these workers' rights being under threat, what we've also got now is a threat to how we respond to that and our right to actually withdraw our labour to protest against these collapsing of the rights that we do. One of the other things that we cannot ignore, however, is that within the very same week that this legislation, the anti-trade union legislation came in, it was also the same week as the Section 35, which has attempted to override the Scottish Parliament's decision on the Gender Reform Act. Now, we don't need to go into the Gender Reform Act. That doesn't actually necessarily matter in this argument, because what happened is we had broad support for that legislation and it's been overruled by the UK government. That is another example of how democracy is now under attack. Mike, you were saying earlier on in answer to a question that actually what this legislation can also mean is that if the Scottish government are negotiating with unions, and as we've probably all recognised, we've negotiated in a much more gentle, much more collegial manner than the UK government has at this stage, it can be overruled. Democracy, I've said this before, but democracy is under threat and trade unions are under threat. But also in addition to that, the Scottish Parliament is under threat as well. We perhaps need to start beginning to see the connections that this is part of a wider attack on democracy. The Conservative legislation seems to say, and this is my last point, and Mike made this point as well, they seem to be trying to put it in the context of, well, European legislation does the same. It doesn't do the same. And as Mike had mentioned, what the European legislation does, it does it in conjunction and discussion with trade unions and with the workforce. What this legislation is doing is ignoring the workforce and actually imposing that anti-strike legislation upon us and against our will. And that is extremely disturbing. We have to vote for that amendment, and I will have to vote for this motion, sorry, but I hope that we all vote for this motion because some things are just too important to lose at this stage.
Thanks very much, Councillor Toland. Certainly agree with both your comments and Councillor Shears. And again, it was remiss of me not to thank you, Councillor Shears, for your collaborative approach on this motion, because I think it is, as you've both said, really important that we stand together on this, on such a fundamental issue, which is about workers' rights, but it's about democracy at its heart. And what we've seen over the last 6 months, after three consecutive Tory governments, is a continued lurch to the right. And with that comes damaging policy and legislative approaches that undermine the progress that has been made across a whole swathe of different areas over consecutive governments and over consecutive decades. There's a couple of other comments to come in, so I'll come to Bailey McPherson next. Fraser?
Thanks indeed, Convener. And as you alluded to in terms of eloquence, I think, as always is the case, Mike Arnott's deputation was both impressive and informative. And I think he very much hit the nail on the head in terms of the issues that are at stake here. However, in terms of cross-party unity, I would just wish to place on record the Liberal Democrat group's strong support for the motion put forward tonight by Councillor Shears. All too often we've seen the actions of this Conservative government as, to be frank, grim at the best of times. And however, on this particular one, I think they've surpassed themselves. We very much view this as something of a deflection tactic for the appallingly poor handling of industrial relations generally by this government. And I think this action should be treated with the contempt it deserves. It flies in the face of all that is reasonable and fair. And therefore, as I say, I think Mike said it all. I will not detain the committee further, other than to say you have our group's strong support for your motion, Councillor Shears, and we're pleased that you brought it forward tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fraser. Willie, is it okay if we can remove the motion from our screens at this point? Thank you. I think everybody has seen it. Thanks very much. Bailey Keenan, I'll come to you next, Kevin.
Okay, thanks. Clearly, I'm going to be supporting the motion. I think the workers do have the right to withdraw their labour if they need to. I think that they've been pushed into a corner by wage restraint over a long period of time. And legislation at the moment is stacked against being able to get industrial action because it puts endless barriers in the way of the trade unions to get to the stage of having industrial action. So, people have the right to withdraw their labour and should have that right. And I'm really, I suppose, quite disappointed that Billy Scott's put down that he's not going to agree to this amendment, bearing in mind that a former councillor, Tory councillor, Bruce Mackey, went on strike with BT and was quite happy to play his role, I'm sure, on the picket line at the time. And he was getting criticised at the time for being a Tory, only for his trade union colleagues to stand up for him and say, he's out the same as you. Because people have the right to withdraw their labour. He did. And obviously seen at that stage that they need to progress their wage deal and make sure that conditions were better. Things that the Tories have stacked up, and I don't really want to turn it into absolute kicking, but the things that the Tories have stacked up over the years have really went out of their way to be awkward with trade unions when they should be looking to work with them so as that things progress in the country rather than its demise.
Thanks very much, Bailey Keenan, certainly supportive of those remarks. Now, I see no further comments apart from Bailey Scott, so I'll just come to yourself, Derek. I know you've got an amendment to the proposed motion, so I'll ask Committee Services to flash that on screen as well, and you can talk to that, Derek.
I don't have a formal amendment
Apologies.
in writing, Convener. I was just going to move that we note the item and take no action. But I'd speak to that if I can, please.
Yeah, of course.
First of all, I'd like to say that I respect Councillor Shears and Mike Arnott as committed trade unionists, and I totally understand and appreciate why they brought this matter forward. But my view is that I agree in principle with what the bill intends to achieve. The ability to strike needs to be protected, but this has to be balanced with the right of the public to have access to essential services during industrial action, especially when life is endangered. Many unions implement derogations to maintain staffing levels and safety critical functions. And we had that during our bin collection strikes when plans were put in place for areas of heightened risk. So there are agreements made on a voluntary basis at times of strikes, but it's not a requirement by law. And enshrining principle in legislation will help protect the public in the future. Now, other countries across Europe do have provisions, and I accept that they might not be directly comparable, but there are provisions in place that balance the right to strike with ensuring that vital services continue to run at a minimum level during periods of industrial action. And I think having a more formal framework will allow organisations to plan for the running of services in times of a strike. So I agree in principle with what the Act intends to achieve, but I also agree with the other speakers that there probably are things that could be done to improve the practicalities of it, about how minimum levels will be decided and how workers may be selected and mandated to cover roles. And I think as it moves through the House of Lords, there's likely to be amendments that will deal with those issues. But as I say, in principle, I'm in agreement with what the bill intends to achieve, which is to ensure that there is a minimum level of service there to protect the public in times of industrial action. So I think on this occasion, while I always like to support colleagues on the council, but on this occasion, I'm afraid I don't agree with what's being proposed, and so I would move that we take no action and don't send that letter.
Okay, Billy Scott, I think you might be a lone voice, and I'm sure you've anticipated that. But before I come in with some comments, and then I'll allow Councillor Shears to sum up, I can see that Charlie wants to come in. So, Councillor Malone.
Yeah, thank you again for letting me in. I don't want to spend too much time on the amendment because I suspect it won't get a seconder. But some of the narrative that we've just heard from Billy Scott alarms me. He talks about people being mandated to go to work, mandated to cross picket lines, which for me is a point of principle, but if they don't, they will be sanctioned, penalised or dismissed. I can't think of anything that's democratic about mandating people to break a strike that they've lawfully engaged in and cross a picket line of their colleagues who are fighting for basic wages and conditions. We're not talking about anything extravagant here. We're talking about making up for 10 years of Baillie Scott's government, which has left wage stagnation, as I said before, second bottom to only Greece. If we had have done something over the last 10 years to stimulate the economy, grow the economy, we could have had we could be in a different position. My wages and conditions are down by 15% in a decade. The spending power I've got, Derek, is down by 15%. So I am taking part in industrial action. I'm grateful that I've got an employer that won't go down the mandated route that the Tories are suggesting. But I think that the whole thing that this comes down to, and everybody's made that's spoken so far has alluded to it, this is an attack on democracy. This is an attack on organised labour, and every single condition of work protection that Baillie Scott and all of us have were negotiated and fought for by trade unions. This is going to make future progress in employee relations very much more difficult. It's not going to appease, it's going to make it more difficult, and there's going to be a lot more resentment and anger within workers who are being denied even the opportunity to express themselves individually and collectively. So I would actually ask Baillie Scott to withdraw his amendment because, as I said, I don't think it'll get seconded anyway, but I think it flies in the face of democracy.
Very much for your comments, Charlie. And I would also say, just on the back of your comments there to add, and I think there was a couple of examples given by Baillie Scott in terms of recent industrial action. And of course, this isn't about whether or not we agree or disagree with individual industrial action. This is about the principle, as you rightly say, and the democratic right associated with that. But even during recent strikes by some of our refuse workers, there was voluntary agreement to support activities to ensure people in the city were protected. And that was done because trade unions and workers have just as much interest in the individuals, the communities they represent and then inhabit, and of course, the work that they do. So I think this is about respect, ultimately, respect for our workers, respect for their rights, respect for their hard-fought rights more than anything else. Okay, I think I'm going to bring in Councillor Flynn as the last contribution before I come back to you, Councillor Shears, because I want everybody to be able to make their voice known. Can I ask just at this point, just for absolute clarity, is there a seconder for Baillie Scott's position? There is not, so that would mean that the proposed amendment. Baillie Scott, I can see you're on mute, but I can't hear you.
I was just going to say, as I don't have a seconder under the terms of standing orders, could I ask for my dissent to be recorded in the minutes?
We will make sure that's done. Thanks, Baillie Scott. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'll keep this short because I tend to agree with probably 90% of what's been said. Obviously, I don't agree with Baillie Scott in any stretch of the imagination at all. I think the right to strike is clearly a human right, and I think it's got to be recognised as that. And this strike of minimum service levels bill is quite simply, it's been stated on the TUC site, for example, draconian and draconian in many, many ways. One of the concerning things about this, you touched upon it yourself, Convener, when we actually see strikes, unions don't just suddenly walk away and then all the employees do nothing. They actually negotiate to make sure we actually support what needs to be supported, and especially with the health and education, etc. If we need people out there bins, there's always, the workers are actually there and they're quite happy to do certain things to get that level of support in there. And I think that's the important part. The life and limb cover is not something that gets ignored. And I think life and limb cover, for example, you've seen ambulance workers go out when they're called out. They're not standing there ignoring the worries of people who are in distress. And I think that's one of these things that the Tories seem to set stress with us. It's this battle against unions, and unions are the be-all and the big bad monster in the corner. So I think that's a concern for me. And the fact that the employers under this new bill can actually put down who has to walk across a picket line is absolutely shocking. You can pick maybe half a dozen workers to go and say do an ambulance service or something like that, where they're quite happy to do this anyway, but then being forced to walk across a picket line when they've actually voted to go on strike. It's an absolutely shocking decision by any sort of stretch of the imagination in many ways. And I always have to remember, going on strike is ultimately a last resort. It's not something that's jumped into very quickly. There's times, lots of negotiation, lots of processes to go through before they get near strike. Strike is a last resort. And I think the unions, I've got the right to strike as a human right, and it should be noted at that. And I think anything this Tory government tries to do with regards to forcing the changes has to be fought to the nth degree to make sure these things don't get through. Because I think everyone, it doesn't matter if you're in the public sector or the private sector, everyone has the right to withdraw their labour if they feel they're being put upon by employers and changing rules, regulations, whatever, which put them under real stress and distress. So just to cut it short there, Convener.
Thanks very much, Mark. Much appreciated. Councillor Shears, I'll come back to you if you want to sum up.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'll keep it very, very short. Just thanks to the SNP and Lib Dems for supporting. I don't agree with anything that Bailey Scott said, as I'm sure he's aware. It is something we'll have a big difference of views on, but appreciate all the support given. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And there being no opposing amendment, that item is agreed. Thank you very much for your contributions. Mike, you are free to leave at this point. Thank you very much for your attendance and your stamina for staying with us for so long. Appreciate it. Okay, Willie.
Thank you very much, Convener. And with that motion being accepted by the committee, it takes you on to item 3. And as indicated, request for deputation has been received from Laura Young to address the committee in relation to this item, disposable vapes.
Thanks very much. And Laura, again, equally, thank you for your patience and your stamina and staying with us for the last 2 hours and 35 minutes. I'm sure you'll appreciate that there's a lot of business to get through, but we appreciate how long you've held on to contribute to tonight's debate and discussion. So I'll just hand over to yourself. As you heard before, you've got 7 minutes with which to address committee. And if you can hold on afterwards for any questions that might come from the floor, and then we'll go on to the item itself to debate and discuss that. So over to you, Laura.
Thank you very much. Whew, I should have had my tea before coming on. My goodness, this is my first council meeting. I thought it was going to be a short wee 45 minutes, but no, it's absolutely great to join with you all. And as I said, it is my first meeting of this kind, so if I don't get all the formalities right, I apologise, but it's lovely to virtually meet you all. So my name is Laura Young. I live in Dundee in the West End, so it's nice to see some of my councillors virtually to come and talk to you guys about the disposable vape issue. This is something that I've been campaigning on for a few months, but also alongside many other organisations. And in Scotland, we seem to be making loads of progress. Hopefully, this is not the first time you are hearing about the issue of disposable vapes. We've had loads of amazing conversations, whether that is in meetings, online and offline, or of course, we've had great media coverage on the radio, on the TV, and hopefully this is something that you will passionately want to support. But I wanted to just outline maybe what some of the issues are around single-use disposable vapes, and hopefully encourage you to want to support a ban on disposable vapes here in Scotland, be the first council to come out and say that, but also get the creative juices flowing, thinking how we can make some real progress in the interim. So I wanted to just go through, almost like bullet point form, some of the problems that are associated with these products. And you'll have to bear with me because there is quite a few. But I thought I would take you to where I first came across this issue, and that is because 6 months ago I came across a single-use disposable vape littered on the ground while out on a walk with the world's cutest dog, who of course is mine. And I picked up this item, wasn't really sure what it was. It looked something like this. I brought props with me to keep you all active, and especially after 2.5 hours, got to keep you engaged. So I found a small plastic contraption like this, wasn't really sure what it was, and like any other piece of litter, picked it up and chucked it in the bin. Turns out that is an absolutely awful thing that I did, but I wasn't even sure what this item was. And actually, ever since that moment 6 months ago, I've been finding hundreds of these littered around the streets. And I moved to Dundee and moved to the West End, as I said, in October, and I've continued to find them. So much so, here's the props that I was speaking about. In this box alone, I have over 100 of these, and these are ones that I've found in the last week alone on my 1 mile walk to work and back. It's the same mile, so this just shows how many of these are being dropped on the same routes in the same places, and so this is an absolutely huge problem.
Why is this such a big problem? Well, when these things are dropped as litter, what is inside a vape, you may ask? Well, first of all, you have the mixed materials around it. This is single-use plastic. There are also metal components. And inside, here we go, I've got a broken one for you, we have a lithium battery. So when these things are thrown away as litter, which we see all over the place, you've probably seen them yourself, these are really damaging items for the environment, because we don't want batteries being squashed and put into our environment. We don't want single-use plastics. We also don't want a little kid coming along and saying, oh, I wonder what this is, picking it up and maybe even, God forbid, trying it. They can be smashed, they can be squashed, and they can even end up like this. You might not be able to see that, but that's because it can be squished as flat as a shard of metal, and these have been known to pop tyres, costing regular people just trying to get to work or go about their business hundreds of pounds worth of damage. So these are a litter issue that are coming across our beaches, our parks and our streets. But litter is, of course, just one part of the problem. We also know that these are massively wasteful. Material Focus did some research across the UK and found that 1.3 million of these are being disposed of every single week. That is 1.3 million electronic devices being sold as single use, as disposable, that are being thrown away, wasting that really precious material. It's also very damaging because you might not know what's inside this. And if you're sold something that is disposable with very unclear packaging and messaging, where would you throw it? Don't worry, it's not rhetorical, I'll tell you. Well, first of all, you might throw it in the bin. But of course, we know that if this has a lithium battery in it, we are never supposed to bin batteries. Just earlier, we were hearing from our amazing fire service, and we know that throwing batteries away into the bin can cause fires, fires in bin lorries, fires in waste facilities. And I was up chatting to MVV in Baldovi, and they are absolutely terrified about the rise of lithium batteries coming into our waste streams, because that can cause really bad fires. Okay, so we're not to put it into landfill, we're not to throw it there. Okay, it must go in our recycling. Wrong. Waste, electronic and electronic equipment cannot be recycled curbside. Okay, that means I need to go down to Baldovi or to Riverside. What if I don't have a car? What if I don't have the time? So these are something that are being sold as disposable, but actually they're really complex. They need to be recycled, and that is not available for everyone. Oh, wouldn't it be great if retailers had collection boxes for these things? It would be great, and that is actually what the regulation is just now, but you will not find collection points at retailers who sell single-use disposable vapes, and that is a failure when it comes to WEEE regulations, WEEE, which is waste, electronic and electric equipment. So we know that we don't have compliant shops, and these are becoming a huge issue of wasting materials and causing confusion when it comes to disposing of them. But the final point is also that these have a huge issue when it comes to young people. I live a stone's throw away from a high school and see lots of young people trying this because these are marketed as fruity air that's something fun to try instead of a smoking cessation tool. They're also flavoured like bubblegum and cherry. This box here stinks of all these different flavours, but these are being sold in a way that markets young people, and they are taking it up and trying it as if it's a lollipop or a sweet, which of course has huge issues. These are also being marketed in a way that is really favourable, I guess, to young people. And just an interesting fact on this, the world's biggest manufacturer of these vapes is China. And in China, they have banned the fruity flavours of vapes for health reasons. It just tells you a little bit of how behind we are on this. So we need to make sure that we are moving away from this. So what am I asking? What's this campaign all about? It is calling for a ban on specifically single-use disposable vapes, which means there is still a vaping option for adults as a smoking cessation tool, but something that is reusable, rechargeable and refillable. We need to move away from single-use disposable items that will end up in landfill, potentially causing fires and potentially causing litter. Now, a ban aligns with the circular economy that we are trying to achieve here in Scotland. It also aligns with net zero and it protects public health. There are loads of different organisations who are campaigning for this. You'll hopefully be able to find all the information online. You just need to look up ban disposable vapes. But I think that's 7 minutes, so I'll stop the waffle there. Thank you very much.
That was spot on, 7 minutes. Thank you very much, Laura. It's almost as if you've been here before or certainly done this before. Very much appreciate your deputation. Eloquent as always and hitting all the key points. I'll open it up to questions from members. So the first one I can see is Bailey McPherson, Fraser.
Thanks very much, convener. And it's certainly been an evening of eloquent deputations between Mike's and Laura's. Laura, I actually heard you on You and Yours. You've had a lot of media profile on this, and that's been absolutely excellent in terms of highlighting this very significant environmental disaster, frankly. And on that same programme, there was a representative of the vaping industry body. I didn't know there was a vaping industry sort of professional body. Well, I don't know if professional is the right word, but certainly body. And I was just really wondering what your reaction was, because I was quite taken aback at their complete lack of preparedness and a complete lack of any thought that they've given to as to the environmental impacts of the single-use disposable vapes that they are actually selling.
That is an absolutely great question. And yes, BBC Radio 4 You and Yours programme had me on alongside a couple others. And if you want to listen to it, I have it recorded. If you look up Ban Disposable Vapes, Less Waste Laura, which is my website, you can listen to it. It's 9 minutes and it's worth a listen. I think my main reflection was the industry excuse, it is an excuse, is, oh, we didn't know what was our responsibility. We were confused by the regulations, which in my mind is unacceptable, because if you go to sell any product in the UK, in Scotland, you need to know what regulations and what standards are in place. It's the bare minimum of what you need to know. That goes for the manufacturers and the brands to understand WEEE regulations, to understand that it's their responsibility to be taking these things back. And if I can just say, it took me and these other organisations one meeting together to work out these regulations. So this industry has no excuse for not getting this right. But I would also extend that out to small retails and small corner shops to also say that all retailers of these also have that responsibility and require to do that. And I think the trading standards on these is a bit of a disaster, both in terms of, I know that the Dundee Trading Standards team did some investigations finding that the majority of the shops in the city centre were selling underage, but they also know that we don't have the regulation take back. I think my main reflection though, just on everything, so all of the media coverage that we've had on this, all of the meetings that we've had on this, the quietest voice has been the vaping industry, because they don't have any arguments. They know that they are failing to comply in a number of ways, and they don't actually have any evidence to back up why these are on the market. Reusables were the first vaping device out there. Disposables have come along because they make more profit. And of course, they have a wider audience because they are targeted for young people. And so I'm really disappointed. And the vaping industry has also failed to get involved with this campaign. They've never really responded to any requests for meetings. And so it's just a bit disappointing, but hopefully that clarifies a little bit of it. But I would highly recommend people listening to it to just hear how unprepared they are to answer very, very basic questions about the regulations of the industry that they are the supposed leaders of.
Very grateful for that response, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll come on to the next question, which is Councillor Anderson. Heather.
Thank you, convener. Laura, that was a fantastic presentation. I've also used the 1.3 million vapes thrown away each week, and we've now worked out that that's Tannadice and Dens being covered, the entire football pitch being covered every month and cleared and covered again. So the scale of it is enormous. I know that you will be aware that the Scottish Government are looking at, they've commissioned an urgent review, but I just wanted you to clarify whether you've approached the UK Government on this issue, because the whole regulation of trade is something that they might have something to say on.
Yep, and I've pretty much had a big fat nothing. So I actually started this campaign engaging with my MP back when I was living in Glasgow in East Renfrewshire, Kirsten Oswald from the SNP. She managed to put a written question and an oral question to the Westminster Government. We also hosted, I wasn't there, but she did on my behalf, hosted a great debate talking about the environmental impacts of these as well. All of those, the response was, we have this thing called WEEE regulations, we just need to make sure people are compliant. That, in theory, if we got it right, should be the solution. And we know that that's not the case. We know that there's so many complexities with these and they're too big of a problem. But also, again, if you would like a laugh, Sky News put a question directly from me to Therese Coffey, and in the question it said, you know, the Scottish Government has put out an environmental review. Are you going to do the same? And her response was, oh, I didn't actually know the Scottish Government were doing that. So there doesn't seem to be much budging down south. I would, of course, have loved this to have been a UK effort, a UK campaign, you know, kind of fight the bigger battle. But unfortunately, we just weren't getting anywhere when it came to Westminster. So that's why me and a bunch of other organisations have been doing a lot of focus up here. And it's been amazing to see the response in terms of cross-party MSPs, my councillors, yourself as well. We've had a meeting about, you know, there's loads of engagement. So, but that has been the Westminster progress or not progress so far.
Thank you very much for that response. I'll come to Councillor Short next. Lynn.
Thank you. Laura, I love your enthusiasm. It's brilliant. Thank you so much. It's probably what's needed at this time of night. I come from a generation where I can remember when people still smoked on aeroplanes, and getting up on a Saturday morning and you could smell your clothes that had been in the bar the night before. And I was really, really excited about the fact that we would be running towards a smoke-free generation. Throughout all of your endeavours, has there been any indication that perhaps the access to vapes is creating smokers again of the future?
Well, one of the things that is certain, and this is research that Ash Scotland have got involved with many others, is that young people in particular, but generally people, but young people in particular, are picking this up as a habit. And that is a stepping stone to many other things. And I too wanted to be a part of, I'm classing myself as that younger generation, I wanted to be a part of the younger generation that was tobacco free. But unfortunately, we now have a generation that's nicotine addicted. And I've spoken to friends at the universities. So I'm doing a PhD in Dundee between both universities. I've been speaking to friends, so this is anecdotally, people who say, I can't stop. I'm sitting in my flat doing it. I can't stop. It's a habit. And I think that's the worrying thing that we have seen. And unfortunately, we know that, you know, things end up being stepping stones, and it's giving kids and young people that kind of wanting to try these things instead of, you know, kind of seeing it as a really big red flag. But what, of course, we don't know is young people have been predominantly taking this up within the last 12 to 18 months. What we don't know is obviously when they potentially reach 18, you know, what that might lead to. Because I guess the worrying thing I will end with is when it comes to shops who are selling these, they don't see it as the same as a pack of fags and a bottle of vodka. They see it as a fruity air that's sort of like a sweetie, when actually, in fact, it's a highly addictive thing that should be challenged 25. So when school kids are being sold these in school uniforms, it's a stepping stone that when they do turn 18 and can get access to lots of other things, what are they then going to try? But there is research out there for young people taking it up. But of course, we need to wait and see. Well, hopefully we don't need to wait and see, but whether that then takes them onto that journey saying, I've got a nicotine addiction, where else can I get it?
Thank you very much. That's all your questions. Your interrogation is over, Laura. Thank you very much for your contribution. So we'll just move on to this item now, and I will hand immediately over to Bailey McPherson.
Thanks indeed, and perhaps could committee services be kind enough to circulate our motion? My colleague Councillor Crichton will second me. The fundamental point here, and sometimes your work's done for you because the deputation is so informative that they make the point entirely for you. But the fundamental point, I would say, in relation to what we've got before us tonight, and what has prompted Councillor Crichton and I, leaving aside the fact that we've come across this issue, everybody does. You know, you come across them day in, day out, as Laura has alluded to. But what prompted us to bring the specific motion before us tonight is the fact that Scottish Government has, and we welcome this, the Scottish Government has asked Zero Waste Scotland to undertake this urgent review into the environmental impact of disposable vapes. And it's important, with that specifically in mind, that we feed into that. And therefore, what the motion is calling for is for the Chief Executive to write to Ian Galland, who is the the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer at Zero Waste Scotland, who are undertaking the review, and to the Minister for Green Skills, Circular Economy and Biodiversity, Lorna Slater MSP, to make clear the Council's view that in light of the environmental damage caused by disposable vapes, that a ban should be introduced as soon as practical. I could maybe just mention at this stage before I pass across to my colleague, as I'm in the business of thanking not just deputations, I would like to also thank Councillor Anderson, who made contact with us to make clear her support, and obviously she is a convener of Neighbourhood Services, and I thought her input and support was very, very helpful. And she raised one issue in relation to counterfeit products, which I'll not steal her thunder on, but I thought was a very, very pertinent point as well. I hope this is something that we can all come together on, because this is not just additional litter on streets in public places. There's a clear environmental danger, as Laura has alluded to, in relation to the fact that these are products that have lithium batteries, copper and so on, and there's a clear environmental danger, not just the litter itself. So as I say, at that, I'll pass across to my colleague, but thank again the deputation, which very much made the case for us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fraser. Just slight correction, I'll pass along to your colleague because it's the chair that does that. But Michael, do you want to come in and second the motion?
Yeah, I'm very pleased to convener, and yeah, just to reiterate everything Laura said and everything Billy McPherson said, that we as a whole committee should agree to command the Scottish Government and try to ask them to ban the sale of disposable vapes. I literally can't believe it that with the climate summit and all the hot air that we hear about climate, and apparently everyone is on the same page on this issue, that with one hand we're saying we'll ban plastic straws, and it's obviously welcome, and then disposable vapes, we see them absolutely everywhere, and we're going one step forward and two steps back. So absolutely everything has been said. I thank Laura for the invitation and our good work on this issue, and keep up the good work. And yeah, I've got nothing more to say. I completely and utterly agree with Billy McPherson and everything Laura said tonight.
Thank you very much. I'll come to my colleague next. So Councillor Anderson, Heather.
Thank you, convener. As Bailey McPherson knows, I would have been happy to second this and very supportive of that action taken. It's emerged as a huge issue. It has an impact on a whole range, health. The point about counterfeit goods is a gentleman called John Dunn, who's the spokesperson for the UK Vaping Association, has said that 62% of single-use vapes being sold in the UK at the moment are non-compliant with domestic law and are counterfeit. So that's a really scary statistic, and I know that our trading standard officers have been out there going around and undertaking surveys in Dundee shops, and they're finding a similar percentage, over 60% not complying with trading standards. So I think it's really good we're coming together to look at this issue in the round, and I'm just supportive of the motion and us continuing to act to combat the harms being caused.
Thanks very much. And just again to reiterate what you've just said and the contributions from Fraser and Michael as well, I'm hoping this is unanimous tonight, given again the points that have been eloquently laid out and the concerns that I think we're all very live to now. And I suppose there is a little bit, and I think this is probably true of the general public, an ignorance of the significant damage that can be caused by these vaping devices. I think there is, because they are termed to be disposable, perhaps a lack of recognition over the significant environmental impact, the health impact, and of course the risk associated with exactly what you described, the counterfeit nature of many of these devices. So I think for all of that, we should certainly be supportive of this motion. Willie, I think we can take that down now, so thank you very much for having that up. And I'll come to my colleague Councillor Short next. Lynn? Lynn?
Thank you, convener. I don't know what happened there. Went on and off. I would just like at this point to say thank you to my colleague Roisin Smith, who was able to get a little bit of intelligence for an area that I was a little bit worried about. As you probably all know around this table, I am a very strange woman, and it's not uncommon for me to go up to 16-year-olds on the bus and ask them why they've got these funny things and do they know what they're sticking in their mouths. I shudder to think sometimes some of the chemicals are going to end up in people's lungs, and I was a bit worried about, you know, the conversations that were happening with our young people across the school estate, and thankfully I was really pleased to hear that there's a really good wide engagement across our children and families service, which I think is really important, because it's all about that jigsaw, isn't it? And understanding that trade and standards have a place, the environment has a place, health has a place, and our young people and their education has a place. And I think we should be really proud as a city that we have looked at this across the political board, because I believe that obviously Lib Dems are here. There's been work with our colleagues from the SNP, and I believe also some of the North East MSPs from the Labour Party have also been involved. So it's good to know that we're all coming from the same place, and it is from that place of wanting Dundee to be a healthier, tidier place, and a place where we don't have to go through puffs of pink smoke to get to where we can be. So thank you for all the work that's gone in from everybody for this, and hopefully it will be successfully through as a motion tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lynn, and I will allow the final contribution to be Pete on this. So, Councillor Shears.
Thanks, convener. I'm wondering if I could ask a question of the convener of Neighbourhood Services. Has there been any thought to making sort of the same kind of bins that they have at Baldoví and Riverside, smaller versions in public places like the city centre? Perth Road, I know is quite bad for it, and has a lot of students coming down the Perth Road Crawl. Has that conversation been had?
I think, sorry, first of all, questions go through the chair, just as a reminder. Heather, I will indulge and allow you to come back in, because I know that you've done quite a lot of work with officers on this, but it's perhaps something that we can follow up after the meeting and provide some written detail about the approach taken. The only point I would make is going back to something that Laura mentioned earlier, which is let's not absolve those retailers and manufacturers of their responsibilities under regulation by doing the job for them. But your point's absolutely well made. And Heather, do you want to come in very briefly?
Councillor Shears, it's just to say, yes, we're having discussions at the moment. Where we have to recycle these products are in the small electrical skips at Baldoví. So we're waiting to find out what the review will say and what guidance will be given. But I'm very happy to take this offline and get back to you with more detail outside the meeting.
Thanks very much. Okay, that being the case, there's no other contributions. So we've heard the motion by Bailey McPherson and seconded by Councillor Crichton. I'll just double check. Fraser, do you want to sum up?
If I could get my thing off mute there. In short, I think it's all been rehearsed, convener, and I'm conscious of time. We're 3 hours in, so at that I'll just waive the right to.
Thank you very much. Okay, I can see no counter proposals in the chat, so can this item be agreed? Thank you very much. Unanimous. Excellent. Laura, thank you very much for your participation. You're welcome to stay on if you wish, but I'm sure you'll want to go get your tea. Local democracy in action. Right. Colleagues, can I suggest, usually I would suggest at the start of P&R that we have a quick 5-10 minute break. I didn't do so because I was conscious that we had deputations waiting. So at this point, can I suggest a 5-minute break? I don't want to take too long. I'm conscious that cut-off is at 8:30. Unless we suspend standing orders, and that's with one slight caveat. I am going to take the next row of items in a different order in order to deal with the items that are time critical. And I'll explain that when we come back. So 5 minutes from now, let's just say 8 minutes past for argument's sake. We'll top off your coffee cups. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you very much. I'll just double check. Willie, you are back on the call, aren't you?
Thanks, convener.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so just to clarify, there are a number of items that I think we need to take this evening. I'm very conscious of time, however, so I'm going to seek your agreement in advance to suspend standing orders only to deal with items 8 through 12, which I deem to be time critical in nature. The rest of the items, if we are not finished before 8:30, which I think very unlikely, then they'll be carried forward to the next P&R on the 6th of March, so not too long from now. Are members in agreement with that proposal? Yeah, perfect. Okay, sorry, Bailey Keenan, do you want to come in, or was that a yes?
Yeah, it's yeah.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so Willie, we're going to go to item 8 first.
Thanks very much, convener. Item 8 is the Dundee Alcohol and Drugs Partnership Strategic Framework and Delivery Plan. You're asked to give recommendations.
So firstly, can I welcome John Wiley to our call, and again also thank him for his patience. I know it's been a long slog for us, but likewise, John, I'm sure you've had a very long day, and being on a call with us at 8:10 is probably not how you imagine spending your Monday evening. This is obviously a really important piece of work, and as the new chair for the ADP, I would warmly welcome you to, I think, your first committee meeting. I know you've had an opportunity to meet with or to engage with some of my colleagues on the call through recent briefings, but if you'll allow me, I'll just hand over to you perhaps to provide some opening remarks and give your perspective as ADP chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks very much for giving me some time to speak with you this evening. I've met a number of you at a briefing event and also at a recent event where we were looking specifically at the impact of on a family of a young person dying through very tragic circumstances, and I was actually, strange thing to say, really buoyed up by the support at that event. A good number of people on this call were there, but it was a fairly broad representation from across the city, from professionals, from parents, small number of young people, and from elected representatives. So that was excellent. And I'll come back to this. We need everybody's help to deliver for people in Dundee and the ADP. And I've got a really, really clear view on this. We've got a strategic framework, which I'm going to talk about, but if that's not delivered, it's meaningless. For me, this is about people, and people are the most important part of this. And I know that I'll have everybody's agreement on that. So, folks, I took over as independent chair of the ADP the very end of October, really into November. My background's in public service for the last 35 years in a variety of roles, but latterly in policing, and most of my work in protecting vulnerable groups has been abroad in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. So, and actually, the reason I mention that is I think there's some learning from working in areas where there's very little infrastructure. I'm not suggesting there isn't in Dundee, but there's some key learning, and for me, it's not just about money. What we're talking about here is about mobilising people and resources. Of course, money is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. We have a framework and delivery plans, and the framework really sets out 5 key areas. I'm not going to rehearse a lengthy document at this time of night, because many of you, if not all of you, will have seen it. But for me, the major piece of this, the absolutely critical part of this, is empowering people. And that's people with lived experience, it's families, it's professionals who also have lived experience. We know where we've been in terms of drug death in Dundee. We know where we are now, and it's unacceptable. I don't think anybody will disagree with that. We need to do more, and we must do more. I'm really, for me, this is about positivity. I'm not interested in politics, party politics. I'm interested in delivery, which is why I agreed to take this role on. I really need everybody on this call to help in whatever way they can, and that will be constructive challenge, obviously, as well. But I really need help, and the partnership really needs help. The 2 observations I would make is that people working in the sector feel really battered and bruised by constant criticism. Now, some criticism is justified, but in my view, a lot of it's not. And constantly getting on people's back who are trying really, really hard, particularly frontline staff. In my view, from speaking to people, what that's done is making it really difficult to recruit people into roles where there's very, very little thanks day to day, and it feels like a real slog working in drug and alcohol services. So I would really ask that everybody considers that when we're talking about this in public, and I've asked for the media's assistance with that as well, because I think they could do more, local and national. It's really, the issues we're talking about here, I don't need to rehearse them, are really, really complex and long-standing, and alcohol and drug use and misuse is often symptomatic of other areas: poverty, domestic abuse, lack of attainment. All these things and many, many more are together. So this framework really is about moving forward, and about moving forward some positivity. I don't really think, John, I really want to go into a massive trail through a document that's been widely circulated and made public, but I'm really keen to address any questions that members might have. And I'll end on saying this: the first 3 months of my tenure, we're really looking at governance and trying to sort that and get it into a state where I thought it might work slightly better. And I think we're getting there. We're not 100% there. We've got some work on a risk register. We've got some work on plans around about finance that we'll perhaps come on to over the next couple of months. But now I'm in the stage of trying to get in to meet people, so I will be reaching out to some of you individually and collectively. And I know I've spoken to some of you individually already, and a number of MPs and MSPs have asked to speak to me, which I will do. And I met with the Minister for Public Health, for Drugs Policy, sorry, a week past Wednesday. So that we're really, for me, I'm in that engagement phase in my role as independent chair, and I view tonight as quite an important part of that engagement. So listen, thanks for listening. I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have. I can't promise I can give you an absolute answer to any of them, because I don't have all the answers. I certainly know that, but I can certainly find out.
Thanks, John. That's really appreciated. And again, I think people will take that opportunity, if they haven't already, to connect with you and have those discussions. And there's a couple of things, two key words that came out of your contribution there: support and delivery. And I think that's broadly our focus as well. How do we support the range of services, agencies, organisations and individuals to deliver on the collective ambition, which is to save lives, to reduce the prevalence of drugs and associated issues? And you've mentioned a few of those tonight as well. So I think you've got certainly a virtual chamber that is in broad agreement with that. And one of the key things for me, and I don't like to give the opposition too much credit too often, but I think on issues of social justice and inequalities, it's one of those strong subjects where I think Dundee can pride itself on a unanimous approach, whether that be the Drug Commission or Fairness Commission or any other kind of social inequality issue. There is a collective response to that, which we're all very live to, in terms of making sure we contribute meaningfully to delivering action and change. So thanks very much for that. I can see that there's 2 questions from colleagues, so I'll bring in Fraser McPherson first.
Thanks, convener, and thanks to John for what he had to say there. And he alluded to the briefing. I thought the briefing was very good indeed, and well attended, and excellent officer, and your own input, John, which is appreciated. I raised at that briefing the issue around the transition of services from Constitution House, and the outcome 1 on page 139 of the document talks about the move to community settings. And if we look at page 89, it indicates that one site has been potentially looked at as suitable for that community-based approach. Now, I think we all agree that the move from Constitution House is absolutely necessary. The facilities are hardly 21st century, and but the concern I've got, and I've had a bit of an exchange with Dan McCulloch on this, is that we don't move until we are satisfied that these community settings are are acceptable and sufficient in number, that we ensure that everybody who needs to access services can still access services. The point I made on the briefing was that for all its faults in terms of being a bit of a out-of-date building and so on, it is at least central, if you know what I mean. The old saying, all buses in Dundee lead to the city centre. So I'm not looking for a detailed answer tonight, John, to be honest. I think what I'm really looking for, though, is a commitment that elected members will be kept updated as to progress in relation to the alternatives to Constitution House, because I'm very anxious that when Constitution House doors close, that we have sufficient community settings to ensure that everyone can easily access services.
So,
John, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so just very briefly, and I might ask Diane to come in. I noticed Diane's hand was up. I know you're not looking for a detailed answer, Fraser. I suppose there's a couple of things, one of which I said at the briefing, that the Constitution House, for me, the importance of Constitution House had been the services that have been delivered, not the building. And I think, you know, any fixation on the building is pointless, and I don't think there's any disagreement about that. In terms of the movement of services, I'll maybe ask Diane to give a very brief update, but we are going to be discussing this very point tomorrow morning at the ADP monthly meeting, so that all members of the partnership can have a sort of clearer view on exactly where we are. I know a number of members, if not everyone, will be aware we've had significant difficulties as well with flooding at that particular premises. So it's under, you know, really direct consideration by the partnership just now. Fraser, Diane, I ask you to come in if there's anything else you'd like to add just now.
Diane?
Yes, thank you, John. So I think there's a couple of things I would quite like to say about this. One is that I think when the recommendation came in, that we were absolutely very clear that this was about also how we work better with the third sector. But one of the first things that we've had to do is to look to see how we can continue to deliver clinical services. So if I just give you a little bit of an example, currently we deliver Buvidal clinics 5 days a week. Those clinics require us to hold on the premises substances which are covered under the Drugs Act, in terms of them being needing to have home office license in order to store those medications and deliver those medications to people. So it's not something that we can take out with a kind of set setting and deliver from anywhere. It has to be done within the confines of the law and legislation. And actually, through the progress that we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks in relation to the flooding at Constitution House, it's been the aspect which has caused us the greatest difficulty to be able to do this in a safe and approachable way. So we have to kind of address this problem in two aspects. One is, how do we deliver clinical services where we can do that in a way that actually provides that legally correctly, but also in a way that makes sense. And one of the options that we're looking at for that is actually Wallace Town Centre. So we're aware that the GP practice is actually moving out of Wallace Town, so we're considering whether or not that's actually an option in terms of the clinical aspect of it. We currently deliver services from there already, and we do one of our drop-in access clinics from that building, so it's not unusual for us to do that. But once we really have struggled to get someplace, we're really taking advantage of a situation which is occurring because of a change in terms of our GP practice, because we really struggled to get someplace that we could move that aspect of the service. Now that we know that we're potentially getting that, we're looking at doing work around what might we need to do to make that suitable. Is it absolutely going to be a suitable option for us? What would we need to be taken into account? And once we've got that confirmed, then what we can start to do is think about how do we deliver the services differently from other areas across Dundee. And that will include working with our third sector colleagues to look at how we have a more visible presence where they are, how we work from different clinics and different kind of practices, and the kind of different models of work that we're actually also looking at in parallel to this. But we have struggled to get the clinical aspect resolved, and that's what's kind of held us back up till now. Just for information, we currently have 70 staff who work from Constitution House, so this is not a case of it just move. We have psychological therapists who work there. We've got pharmacy who works there. We have doctors, and we have a range of different professions. So we need to work out how we can best make that move that makes sense while dealing with the issues that we need to continue. So a good bit of a step forward just occurring this year that we're quite hopeful about, and then we'll take it from there. Billy McPherson.
That's a very helpful response, Dan. And all I would say is, and you know this anyway, as does John, that we're very keen to ensure that there's ongoing engagement so that we know how progress is going. But very grateful for these responses. Thank you.
Can I just mention one thing, convener? Yeah, just two very quick comments at the end of that. Diane, thanks very much. I appreciate how much work there's been, particularly in this issue over the new year and ongoing, and very rarely are you thanked in public. So as independent chair, I'm saying thanks, and I'm sure members would agree with that. I think, Fraser, the wider point in your question, and this for me is about delivery. If we waited to have a model that delivered it all over Dundee, we wouldn't get that done in the 5-year plan. In terms, and I know that's not what you're saying, but there are a number of people saying, can we do this in multiple places simultaneously? My personal view as independent chair is let's get at least something sorted to build on. And that's what when I'm talking about practical and effective delivery, I'm not waiting for a Rolls-Royce models. I'm sure, well, if anybody is, I think we're going to be waiting an awful long time. So I think that first step is not necessarily the final step, Fraser, because your wider point is well made.
Grateful for that, and I was interested in what Diane had to say with regard to Wallerstown. So as I move my GP practice to Douglas, as I will be doing, obviously there is obviously potential for access there, and obviously it's pretty close to the city centre as well. But obviously we'll keep a watching brief on this, and grateful that we'll be kept updated. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll come to Bailey Keenan next. Kevin.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Whaley, thanks for your honesty, I think, in your presentation. I know you haven't went through it in every detail, that time's probably no allowing with for that. But, I think that comments that were made that were negative in the past, were life experience and people's understanding of that at the time. And it is very difficult for a service to shake that off. And, I wish the service well in shaking that off. I think it's really important, but it does mean that the service needs to change so that these historic things are well forgotten and behind it. The other thing, because I was on the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, seemed to me to be that would upset staff would be this constant bidding for bits of funding. And that level of insecurity that would bring no knowing the direction of travel. I thought the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, based on that, was just a wee bit directionless, and wondering how you see that. And I know that you're saying we'll no have the Rolls-Royce model, let's say step-by-step change, which is good. But these bid for wee pots of money here, there, and everywhere takes up an awful lot of officers' time. You might not necessarily be successful, and at the same time you throw that level of uncertainty as to whether the staff should be doing what they're doing at the moment, or looking for the next job that will come up because that funding's coming round.
John?
Yeah, listen, thanks very much. I wasn't, by the way, trying to suggest that everything's perfect. If everything was perfect, you wouldn't need an independent chair and you wouldn't need an ADP. So things need to change. Completely accept that. I haven't spoken to anybody in any role where elected representative, a family member or somebody that's struggling, or anybody else that wouldn't share that view. In terms of, I 100% agree with you that where there's year-on-year funding, it's not particularly helpful, because year-on-year funding probably means 9 months. But by the time you've got to give people notice that they might not be working. That's a really big issue for our third sector colleagues, much more so than our statutory colleagues. I raised that very point with the minister. I don't think in an introductory meeting it's helpful for me to share a private conversation with the minister, but that was one of the things I wanted to raise that's not a particularly great model. And it's not, I'm not making a political point. I'm making a point that yearly funding's not great. But for me, we need to be looking at 3 to 5 year funding if we want to make things sustainable. So that's what I've asked for. To be fair, what we are seeing with the CORA funding and other applications that we're getting 2 years or sometimes 3 years, and just in terms of getting ahead of that, we are talking tomorrow morning about our commissioning plan, which I don't want to get ahead of the ADP meeting tomorrow because we haven't discussed it across the partnership yet. But we are working, we're getting fantastic support from finance within the council and other people in bringing that forward. So I don't want to be constantly looking for a trickle of money to last a year ahead, because that, as you rightly point out, doesn't work. I think we're in a reasonable place there. We're not where we'd want to be, but we're in a reasonable place. And I think going forward, we'll be keeping a very close eye on the financial situation, which is a much bigger issue than challenges simply facing the ADP.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Kevin. And that's the last question. So thanks very much, John, for sticking with us, and thanks, Diane, for contributing to that discussion as well. And thanks for the questions. So I'll just ask, can we agree this item, which is for noting? Thank you very much, John. You're free to leave and go grab yourself a cup of tea, or maybe your tea. Thanks very much for your contribution, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
And thanks very much for everyone's support. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, with that in mind, we'll move on to item 9. Willie?
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. For that, item 8 having been agreed, item 9 is Local Authority Tenant Hardship Fund, and this is for approval.
Again, members will recall that we recently discussed the hardship fund and the process by which we would provide that support to tenants who required it. Of course, it's an important component in terms of how we deal and support our tenants during this cost of living crisis, but I'll just open it up immediately to any questions. So Daniel, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Convener. Our group welcome the increase of the hardship fund for 23-24. I note that an exercise will be carried out to identify tenants not in receipt of housing costs support via universal credit or housing benefit. Can I ask how this is done, as I'm anxious that no tenant in real need is overlooked? I appreciate there will be tenants on full rent who will not require support in this way, but how confident are we that all tenants not in receipt of housing benefit or universal credit but needing support from the hardship fund are correctly identified?
Okay, I'll bring in Jackie Capel, who I think is on the call. Jackie, can I bring you in to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Coleman, for the question. As the policy states there, we will identify all tenants not in receipt of VHB and UC through an exercise through our housing system. All tenants not in receipt of housing benefit or universal credit will receive an award from the hardship fund up to the maximum value of the rent increase, the 3% rent increase that was agreed earlier on in the year by committee. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie. And of course, this is a contribution to a wider set of supports that's available. And obviously, your team and others in the council have been working extensively on the other supports through Fuel Well, DHP, crisis grants, etc. So I think it's a real added string to our bow. I see no further questions, so I'm hoping that that is agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Willie, we'll move on to item 10.
Yep, thank you. Item 10 is Planning and Building Standards Management Software. You asked to give the proposals.
Self-explanatory. Can we agree this? Thank you very much. Okay, Willie.
Item 11 then is the Financial Management Software Report. This is for approval.
Again, self-explanatory. Is this agreed? Thank you very much.
Item 12 then is non-domestic rates. You're asked to agree the proposals.
Again, hopefully you've all had a chance to read the report. I can see there's a couple of questions on this one, so I think I'm right. Sorry, Fraser, you were first there. Let you come in.
Thanks, Convener. Just a very brief question, because I maybe I missed it, but it didn't really seem to come out in the report. I can see good reason why local authorities may wish to change there will be devolution of NDR, empty property relief, in order to try to get, as the report alludes to try to get some empty properties back into use. And I understand that. What's not very clear is, given that non-domestic rates is locally collected, but it's actually a national tax and there's a national pool, what I'd really like officers to clarify is, if, for example, you changed it so that you raised more, do local authorities get to keep that, or does it go back to the national pool? And the very good reason for asking that, I actually asked Paul Thompson recently what we collected and what we got back. And we collected in 21-22 as a local authority £46.125 million, but only got back, as a city, it's unsurprising, we only got back 26.821 million. So we're a very significant net contributor to the non-domestic rating national pool. And I was just really wondering what would happen if we changed the policy so that we actually raised more money. Would it go to the pool, or would we as an authority be able to hold on to that?
Thanks for the question, Fraser. I'll bring in Robert.
Thank you.
There you are. Sorry, I couldn't see you on my screen, Robert.
No,
Carry on.
that's fine. Thank you, convener. So how the devolution of this relief works is that we've been given a sum of money to each council, actually, as in case, and if we continue with the existing scheme, that should cover our costs. If we reduce the level of relief that we offer, so for example, if we were to remove the exemption on listed buildings, then that would amount to a saving for the council, and that wouldn't go back to the pool, Bailey McPherson. So we could alternatively offer a higher level of relief, but that will be at a cost to the council. So the amount that's been devolved to each council gives us discretion over the period to change the policy to achieve policy objectives, and that might come with a financial benefit to the council, or there might be a financial cost depending on the policy that's been implemented.
Okay, that's very helpful. So it's genuine devolution as opposed to, well, you can change the policy, but the pool benefits. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. Kevin, come to you next.
I suppose the question is somewhat answered, but I'm wondering if in bringing back proposals, then the officers have that in mind to reduce that pool, given that we're a cash-strapped council that's making a lot of cuts. I was surprised at the number of listed buildings that we've probably got empty and the amount of money that we spend on them, given, I suppose, that recently we've had the fire at the Robertson's shop that's now just wiped off the map. And wondering how best we bring through sort of sensible approach, bring some of these things back in, given that in domestic properties, they obviously increased the price of council tax and doubled it, just to make sure that properties come back into use. So what's officers' view on what they'll be bringing back is really what I want to know.
I think that's part of what they're suggesting, which is a full report which details their thinking. So I think you're trying to preempt a report that will come forward, but I'll bring in Robert and let him answer for himself. Robert.
So thank you, convener, and thank you, Bailey Keenan. I think clearly the financial environment is in our mind, but the discussion that we're having at the moment amongst officers is how we can use it to support businesses and drive economic objectives and property objectives. So part of the discussion we had earlier was the hazard that empty listed buildings and non-listed buildings create. How can we bring buildings back into use and reduce the risk and improve prosperity in the city? So they're all things to look at. We haven't started with any presumption that we will change policy, and indeed there are some aspects, for example, like properties in liquidation, where I think it will be hard to do anything about it, and there will continue to be a cost which is not within our control. So we'll be looking at all of those options, convener, and bringing a report back.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, well, just hoping that it'll be back if there is to be a level of change, that people have got a bit more time to get used to the idea of they may be paying instead of being the benefit of some for free.
Thanks very much for that. I see no other questions on this item, so can I take it as agreed? Thank you very much. Can I just make one very brief suggestion, since item 3 is for noting on the private section and we've already signed it off as political leads? Can we just agree that we agree that in the usual way, should I say? Thank you very much. That means items 4 through 7 are to be carried forward. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening. Get your tea, and I'll see you on Thursday. Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.